Good evening. Welcome to the stream. I hope everybody's well. I hope everybody had a good Christmas and all that kind of stuff. Oh god damn it. Totally forgot to turn off the sound on my tabs. Because I'm absolutely an expert at this. I've only been doing this, how many years? Anyway, yes. So just checking everything now because numpty start to the stream. Yes, I hope everybody is well. I hope everybody had a good Christmas. It was very quiet for me. I cooked myself a good meal, chilled out, did as little as possible, and have continued to do as little as possible for all the time since. Not entirely true, I guess. I have made significant progress in the review for the ninth configuration. I'm now 5 pages in. I've recorded what I've written. I've probably got about a page and a half, maybe possibly 2 more to do on that. And then it's just editing it. When it's going to get up, I don't know. I'm going to try and do some over the next few days before I head back to work in whatever capacity that happens to be. Because we've still got all the chaos, we've still got all the craziness which is going on. But yeah. So here we are for the New Year's stream. It seems like only yesterday that we were doing this again and thinking that, my God, this year is going to be so much better. Poor naive fools that we were. Oh dear. Yeah, I just wish I had a bit more energy, Kerry. I think it's partly because I literally just sat on my arse this entire Christmas holiday. And so it's been very low energy. But, you know, that's how it is, I guess. Yeah, you make your choices. But, you know, as you sort of reflect, it's that time of year we're supposed to be reflecting on what's gone by and what we hope to go to and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, I think if it's anything positive which has come out of the last 2 years, I picked up a couple of hobbies, I've got my photography going on and all that kind of stuff. Flickr's got a competition for a photo of the year. I submitted one of my photos to that, so we'll see if it's already got a little bit of attention. Funny enough, so you know, it's unlikely, but you know, I'll put it out there. Absolutely, put it out there. Nothing wrong with sitting on your arse, Glenn, says Kerry. I should be a bit more productive. It's been one of the weird things, especially this last 2 years with everything that's been going on, that my creativity when it comes to all of this stuff has really taken a knock, and I'm really kind of like trying to sort of pull that back. And the Exorcist reviews that I did so far have been a positive experience, though incredibly hard work. I don't remember ever being quite as hard work as this. Certain ones have been. But the fifth configuration, it's the earlier one. Ninth configuration is hopefully going to be a good little cap to all of that. But yeah. Frank says, I don't know if it's not seeing you in a month. Have you lost weight? You look thinner. Now, it might just be the lighting. I doubt I've lost weight. I don't know. I don't regularly weigh myself, so and I don't particularly look at myself in the mirror. So, but hopefully it's a good loss of weight if it is a loss of weight. It's not like I kind of like you know, been on a diet or nothing. December was kind of crazy. It had to be said, like late November into December was absolutely crazy with work and stuff like that, and the battering around between kind of like, you know, dealing with COVID cases and all that kind of stuff did make life quite tricky for a little while. But yeah, we got more of the same as soon as we hit the ground. Not quite sure what we're going to be walking into. Hi Glenn and everyone. As sad as The Last Cinema Sewer has been released, it was my Bible for the last 25 years. Oh, that's a shame. I did not know. But yeah, it's been a funny thing. Like I say, I mean, the positive things is I did come out with like a hobby, and I've been getting serious enough with my photography that I picked up this big old bugger. I think I've shown it before, but super telephoto lens and 2-time extender for it and all that kind of stuff. That's been quite something to do, quite a journey. I'm sort of glad I didn't have to deal with film. Digital is so much easier to handle. One of those things, isn't it? The progress of technology and all that kind of stuff. I would love to learn the film sort of end of it, but it's one of those things. It's like you're never quite sure what you're getting until you've got it back from the people who process them, and it kind of makes life a lot more difficult. I like the digital sort of stuff because you take your photos, you can review them immediately, and you can kind of process them around and all that kind of stuff, and come out with stuff. And I'll just show you the. This is, and I promise I won't do too much of this. But this is the photo that I've submitted to the competition, which you may have seen on Facebook, and that's the sort of stuff I'm doing these days when I get a bit of time. It's fun. It's expensive, I mean, I'm looking at some point at getting like a big telescope, bigger than the one I've got. It needs to be a bigger kind of reflector in it to gather light and keep resolution and that kind of stuff. But that's probably a couple of years down the line, unfortunately. But in the meantime, I make do with what I've got, because I had some really good photos of like kind of Jupiter and Saturn and all that kind of stuff. But I can't go any further with the equipment that I've got, unfortunately, because the telescope's just that bit small. But it was beginner's telescope, the one I got. This 130 EQ Celestron, and it's quite nice. It's powerful enough to just be able to make out the kind of bands on Jupiter. If you've got like kind of decent lenses in there and stuff, but over and above that, yeah. Adam says it's been a real positive this past year. It's been a difficult year for all of us. Thank you. You're very welcome. I mean, I've said it before. I'll say it again. The reason I do these things is gives you guys a little bit of something, especially considering my output is a lot slower than it has traditionally been. It gives me an opportunity to give you guys a little bit of a alternative to cramming yourself into a big bug infested pub. It's not so bad a thing at the moment, obviously, but it's been nice to be able to make that contribution to you guys. Responsibility calling. We'll be back in a bit. Okay, Gary. But yeah, it's been an interesting one, and it's sort of looking forward and what's going to happen, trying to make positive changes in my life and things like that. As we're kind of looking forward, although when you hear some of it, it's probably not going to seem like a positive thing. Certain things that have become a lot clearer, in terms of going into the sort of film and games kind of thing. There's certain things that I'm kind of looking at in the future about kind of like, what games do I buy, what films do I watch, that kind of stuff. And one of the things is really, I guess, one of my New Year's resolutions, because I basically cancelled my cinema subscription last year, because I wasn't going to get any use out of it. Every time I look at the lineup, it's like, wow. It's just, so much of it is utter shit that I kind of just come to the conclusion that Hollywood has got so little to offer these days that I just don't want to participate in it anymore. Obviously, there's going to be a few exceptions. It's like my brother, who may or may not be watching, he put me onto the James Gunn The Suicide Squad film, and I enjoyed the hell out of that, which is nice because DC movie. I've always kind of like said that the vast majority of the DC movies are just not for me. I struggle with the Zack Snyder kind of vision and all that sort of thing. And it was interesting to see James Gunn's handling of it. And it is super violent. If you haven't watched it and you want to see a super violent comic book story in the kind of violence in the kind of degree of Deadpool, but in the DC world, then I can recommend it. It's got its faults. I think the finale is a little bit kind of it's a bit of a blown finale, but not bad enough to actually kind of make it feel like a waste of time. But for the most part, I've gone without watching most Hollywood films for such a long time now. And partly that's because I'm not writing about them for Frankly Green Bay anymore and stuff like that. I don't have to go to the cinema and watch this stuff anymore. I can be picking and choosing. Richard says you saw the Matrix 4. I've heard such mixed reviews of that film. I think going by the average of what people have been kind of reacting to it like, I find that it's probably in the whole kind of level of it's okay. I don't find too many people really kind of gushing over it, and when they are, they tend to be kind of like in the same way that a lot of other films that were very divisive have kind of been looked at, like, if that makes sense. It's one of those things. It's like the positive reviews of it seem a little over enthusiastic and probably a little bit too kind of a little bit too soon in the kind of stuff that they're actually kind of trying to be positive about, because it's very difficult. And I found this out, through writing about kind of like current films, of going to the cinema and then writing a review. And if you don't do that, it's a very difficult thing to sort of appreciate that that's actually quite a tricky thing to get right. I've certainly made mistakes in the past when kind of looking at those things, got caught up in the moment and thought, actually, that's a pretty good film, when it turns out to have been utter trash. It usually takes time for these things to sort of settle in. So I kind of see a lot of that in the positive reviews for Matrix 4 and with the negative ones as well. But to be honest, with the Wachowskis, I've always, even really to a degree from the first Matrix, although I do enjoy the first Matrix and I think it's a very good fun film, find the philosophy kind of end of it is very overblown. It's not very focused is the biggest part of the problem. And I've always described the Matrix, even the first one, as being like somebody's gone to a philosophy library with a wood chip and then just started throwing philosophy books into it at a wallpaper pasted wall, and then to see what sticks and goes, oh, that's our script. It's like they got away with the first one to a great degree, and I think a lot of that was down, as much as anything really, to the spectacle of it, the brevity of the first one, because it really doesn't hang around. It's sort of there and it's gone. It had to be a self-contained story, so they couldn't get overly self-indulgent in the way that the second and the third one did. And that was the worst one about the last two, was that, really. It was just, it should have been one movie. And, I suspect that if you were so inclined, you could actually edit those two movies down into one good 3-hour movie. Vast majority of the reviews I've read about the new Matrix film have been poor. We'll get round to watching it soon. I may watch it at some point when it's on Prime or something like that. I don't know. I certainly not going to be rushing out to see it. That's for sure. If you thought the last two were bad, you haven't seen anything yet. It can't possibly be as bad as the second and the third one, surely. DC Frank says, as much of a DC whore as I am. I mean, look at my name. The DC movies are just dreadful. I get the DC animated films are far better and cheaper. Batman Hush is quite good, as is Throne of Atlantis. Okay. See, the problem with the DC universe, apart from, kind of like my problems with it's as much the tone and kind of intent, I think, of Zack Snyder's stuff as it is anything else. Some people really enjoy it, and fair play. Go and enjoy it. It's I'm certainly not going to take something away from you that you enjoy. Well, not you specifically, obviously. DC has sort of been in a very difficult position in some respects, in that Zack Snyder has so heavily kind of like branded the cinematic universe, and they hoped it would work well, that he'd be the Kevin Feige of the DC universe, and it just wasn't working. And then trying to kind of fuck it around a bit and kind of redirect it and do all that kind of stuff, it's had no sense of purpose, very much like the Star Wars kind of stuff which has been going on. And I mean, traditionally I've always said that my my least favourite films, you know what my least favourite films were: Frozen, Scream, and Cold Fish, the British film. And Rise of Skywalker is probably above both of those right now. It's in the number one slot as far as I'm concerned, because that was literally one of the worst films I've ever seen. I unironically put Manos: The Hands of Fate above Rise of Skywalker. It's just a horribly made film. But the point is, I mean, when it comes down to it, those things, when it comes to these franchises, you need direction, you need that kind of roadmap of where you're going. And that's something that the Marvel Universe, love it or hate it, did well. Then they kind of, they did sort of steer course a bit as things went on, as you would expect, but they had a pretty damn good idea of kind of how things are supposed to look, how things are supposed to feel, and you could say that gives it a bit of a cookie cutter feel. To an extent it does, but there is still the authorial kind of touch to most of the films. You look at like the James Gunn stuff, for instance, is actually very James Gunn, and there's several of the film's entries that have a directorial kind of stamp on them, even though they're kind of designed to sort of fit in with the rest of the stuff. And DC were trying to do that with Zack Snyder's stuff, but when people really kind of took against it, what were they supposed to do? So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do that. I think Marvel caught lightning in a bottle when they did their stuff. But DC has struggled to do that. Although I have to say, the Suicide Squad film by James Gunn was, at the very least, a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it as a spectacle. I think James Gunn has a real good command of characters. He's very good at kind of handling characters, and I think that's a huge part of kind of like what's important in these films. You don't necessarily need to have them cookie cutter, but you do need to have people who are you do need to have a kind of direction for the characters and really kind of think those things through if you're going to link everything together. And DC never got the pacing right. They never got all that kind of stuff right. So it was all a bit it was all a bit ramshackle. It's kind of sad the worst film one has ever seen has been getting topped year after year. I find it very difficult. I mean, I'm very specific, I think, when it comes to what I think is truly a bad film. I've got plenty of bad films up on my wall. Films that people would kind of look at and go, oh wow, that's shit. And to an extent they're right. Production values might be bad, acting might be bad, writing might be bad. But you get some of these films, and there's often an earnestness to them. There's an honesty to a lot of them, not to all of them. Some of them are just cynical exploitation, and that can be fun in its own right. But they haven't spent 150 billion on the damn things. Just like a $40,000 film or something like that. It's had pennies thrown at it, relatively speaking. And it's what makes the kind of the Hollywood sort of stuff a bit obscene to me when they go, this is a $250 or $300 million film, and then they go and put an extra 80 million on it for kind of like re-editing and focus testing and all that kind of stuff, and it's all that kind of weird, just throw money at it kind of thing, which is kind of funny really, because I mean that is one of the attitudes that Hollywood's had, is they brag on the budgets and all that kind of stuff. It's a it's a strange. It's one of the more grotesque sort of capitalist mindsets that you get with something like Hollywood, because filmmaking is a business, particularly in Hollywood. So they like to flash it around and go, look how much money we're spending on this and that kind of stuff. But yeah. Glenn, do you think that a 3-hour version of Exorcist 2 would have made it a much better film? There's two approaches. They could have made a 3-hour version, which, if it was handled correctly, of Exorcist 2 this is, if it was handled correctly and the writing was kind of like handled in a way that actually kind of makes it worthwhile and great, the other option is to take the original version and kind of cut out certain bits and then add other bits into it to kind of make things sort of work properly. The problem with The Exorcist 2 is, I think, apart from anything else, when the director doesn't like the original film, which is fair enough, doesn't have to, but when he finds it so kind of vile that he goes in completely the opposite direction, that's a problem, because one of the things, and certainly one of the things I've kind of learnt from looking at the Exorcist sequels, has been that Blatty really does have a very specific thing that he writes about in that. I mean, essentially, you've got the Faith trilogy, which is The Exorcist, The Ninth Configuration, and Legion, right? Ninth Configuration was originally released as Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, as a novel, and they're known as the Faith trilogy, and that gives you an idea of kind of like what the soul, for want of a better word, of The Exorcist is, the Exorcist stories. You look at the Ninth Configuration and it's not at all like Exorcist or Exorcist 3. If you weren't told it was an Exorcist sequel of kinds, then you wouldn't know. You really wouldn't. It stands so much on its own in kind of like the more overt stuff, because the Ninth Configuration isn't even a horror film. So there's no spinning heads, there's no demonic possession. It's really down to the nuts and bolts of what The Exorcist is about, which is about faith and various matters of that kind of nature. Faith and sort of God and the nature of evil, that kind of thing. And Exorcist 2 really didn't go down that way. It became more like a voodoo movie. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed The Exorcist 2. It's kind of batshit crazy, but I do enjoy it. But I've kind of come to the conclusion Exorcist 2 is not really an Exorcist film. It's sort of an Exorcist flavoured film. If that makes any kind of sense at all. Oh dear. DC Frank says, Glenn, I think the big difference is the rubbish films we watch. The filmmakers are under no illusions. Hollywood bad films are utter rubbish, but the filmmakers think they're making high art. It's not always the case. Some are very well aware of what it is that they're making, and even with the studios, not always thinking it's high art, but certainly they have to sell these things as having some value. It is always kind of funny when Hollywood tries to defend certain films. Of course, these days there's a lot of online kind of interaction between the studios now, or at least the directors and the movie-going audience, and it all too often devolves into well, you don't like it because you're misogynist or you're whatever, all that kind of stuff. And equally, it comes from the audience and goes back there. There's very little civil discourse about these things. So when you get like with Ghostbusters 2016, the interaction that sort of happened between that, I can kind of understand sometimes from the stars and the filmmakers why they react the way they do, and sometimes it's with less political intent than it is kind of just having a way of sort of like slapping back. That's not to say that they're right. It's not to say that they're right. DC says Ghostbusters 2016 and The Last Jedi, cough. Yes. Richard says the problem is with Exorcist 2 is the director. I mean, look at Zardoz. What the fuck was that? Zardoz is not as bad a film as a lot of people really kind of say it is. I think there is genuinely interesting stuff in there, but it's just sort of cloaked in this kind of weirdness that I think throws people, and it's understandable. When you got Sean Connery kind of going around in that bandolier and the trunks and that kind of stuff, it's a bit of a wild image to say the least. But there are interesting ideas going on in it, and it's very easy to get caught up in the kind of like ridiculousness that you see. And that's the thing. You've got to when you're watching films like that, it's worthwhile sort of occasionally, not always. It's probably not healthy to take my approach at all times, but ask yourself why it is that you're seeing what you're seeing, and that usually starts with me with the question: who's the narrator in this film? Whose world is this? And from that point, you can start to kind of unpick these things, and you can see why things go crazy. If you haven't watched The Ninth Configuration, if you've got some time tomorrow, it's on Prime. Go watch it. It's a fascinating film, and I highly recommend you see it before you watch my review. There's a lot of very, very odd stuff goes on in that film. I mean, there's a part where one of the patients is kind of like he's begging the asylum staff, the hospital staff, to return his flying belt. You kind of go, well, this is just the words of a madman, because the whole place is full of madmen. That's the point of this place. There's another scene where they come out. It's a little bit later on. They come out of the office. Two of the guys come out of the office and they're having this conversation, and this guy just flies by on this jetpack. Really slowly, smoke sort of billowing up behind him and all this kind of stuff, and it's just it's completely off the wall. And one of the things I do say in my review about that is that The Ninth Configuration is one of the funniest films I've ever watched, at least for the first half. There's some genuinely hilarious stuff going on in that film. But it's for a reason. There's purpose behind what's going on, the madness, the strange things that go on. And it's a fascinating film, and I highly recommend not just watching it once, watch it at least twice. Richard says, I love the knife configuration, wasn't expecting the ending. Would you ever do a review of the Omen trilogy? I think there's a lot less to talk about with the Omen trilogy. It's not to say that I haven't thought about it, and it's not to say that I wouldn't do it. But the Omen trilogy is a monster movie, essentially, in many regards. There are some interesting subtexts when it comes to the nature of power. And one of the interesting things I heard said about that series of films is that God is utterly absent in it, and to a great extent, with the Exorcist films, it's not God doesn't make an appearance in it, if you know what I mean, in any meaningful sense. It's about with the Exorcist, it's about faith and questioning the existence of God, or at least exploring the question of the existence of God and all that kind of stuff, and the nature of evil and that kind of thing. The Omen really kind of sort of puts its finger on a very different thing, which I think means more to an American audience than it does to an international audience, where it's talking about kind of like, birthrights and the nature of political power and that kind of stuff. And that's what the Omen at best really kind of does, and it gets a bit shaky as it goes along. It gets a bit more comic book as it goes along. I mean, yeah, I'll consider it. I'd consider doing a review of it. Maybe I should. I think if I was to do it, I'd probably do the original 3 films as a single review, because I think it's worth looking at in that kind of sense. No spoilers for Knife Configuration, please. Never seen it. I'll not say anything too much about it, but it is well worth a watch. And like I say, it's available on Amazon at the moment, on Amazon Prime. If you've got Prime, you can watch it. I suspect it's in a few places as well. Oh dear. just desperate for a job post Bond. Everyone was on a lot of drugs when they made Zardoz, very possibly. King Liam says, all I know of Omen is Gregory Peck being almost killed by the IRA. I mean, the first one is a good film, in many respects, but yeah, is it as good as The Exorcist? Some people think it's better than The Exorcist. I think for me, it's a film that offers a lot less in terms of interesting subtext, although, like I say, the political kind of subtext is actually kind of worth exploring. If I was to review it, then that's certainly what I would be looking at. Sean Connery in fetish gear in Zardoz. So, it's not really fetish gear. I can't remember what the reason why they actually said that they went down that line. They had like a really kind of reasonable explanation as to why they went with that sort of costume choice, and it was something to do with this sort of fireworks going off. It's going to sound like Nam in here any minute now. I think it was something to do with like this sort of kind of hyper masculine kind of thing, and they wanted to sort of go down that line. Whether, obviously the audience didn't really quite receive it in that sort of way, but you can kind of see the point of it. I mean, there is that element of sexuality and kind of that element of sexuality that runs throughout the entire film. It's an integral part of what's going on in the film. So I think that's what they were trying to go for, but you need to watch Jean Rollin and Renate Porcelli. All I've seen from Rollin is Zombie Lake, and it was shocking. That was not a good film. Rollin's kind of like a lot of the directors in his shoes. They made a lot of trash, but there are some serious fans of his work. You know, people who are interested in his work as I am in Jess Franco's work, as a for instance. DC Frank says, "Oh yes, you remember your tour in Nam, Glenn." Bullet wound from Nam. Charlie jumped out from the bush. I said that to someone because it's quite a big scar, and I kind of like jokingly said it was it's a bullet wound in Nam, and they believed me. It's at that point I kind of like look at my sense of humour and go, I'm probably a little too dry when it comes to that kind of stuff. Oh dear. It's starting to be recognised as the artist who brought his movie now are on the BFI website now. I think his day job making porn is why he was never given credibility. Same with a lot of the directors at the time. There were jobbing directors. You know, they ran around doing whatever the hell it was kind of needed of them. So many films where Jess Franco sort of stepped in at the last minute to kind of replace the director who had either quit or just wasn't available. And he'd go make 2 or 3 films at the same time. Often on the same budget. You know, it's like kind of like, yeah, well, we can save a bit of money on this main thing I'm here for and just sort of direct it over there. And I can take a quick shot from that and then justify it for this film. It's almost fraudulent. Almost. I think he did actually get into a lot of trouble with that. I mean, Jess Franco, for instance, was pretty much blacklisted in the UK because of the nature of a lot of the films that he made. The BBFC kind of like had him on a checklist, and if it came in, it was pretty much an automatic sort of no. Where's Wally's named Charlie in France, which is very fitting. You can never find it. Oh dear. The world, the state of international kind of like interventionism. It ain't new, folks. It's just got worse. Italian Batman's actor Mark Shannon's pretty legendary in the horror genre, isn't he? Seen Snob review Porno Holocaust. I mean, I reviewed Porno Holocaust. Now, it's one of the ones I'm surprised wasn't pulled off of YouTube a long time ago, just because of what it is. I thought it was, for what it is, not bad. There are more Franco films coming out now. There's a lot of stuff which is being re-released and some stuff which is kind of like coming out that has never had release. I mean, I got where is it? There it is. I've got to get round to reviewing it at some point. Although, you know, I think it'll be quite a difficult one to do. But a Jess Franco film with Christopher Lee. Oh, Christopher Lee worked with him a lot, but it's Mark Hamill as a Nazi. And I just kind of, there's that meme of Mark Hamill where he goes, Nazi! You know, he's referring to, like, you know, take BB-8, paint him black and flatten his head, and he's Nazi. But yeah, Mark Hamill is a Nazi. Very odd film. Very odd film. Because it's pretty much a sort of melodrama romance type film. It's not a horror film. It's not an action film. But it just features Nazis. And it's almost not an issue. It's like they just happen to be Nazis. It's not an awful lot other than the kind of background of this is World War II that makes it kind of important that they'd be Nazis. It's like I don't know what he was thinking. I really don't. And how the hell Mark Hamill got involved in it, I don't know. Because, you know, I mean, Mark Hamill's been involved in a lot of low-budget films and that kind of stuff over the years. But, yeah. Franco's movies are sleazy even for the sleazy 79's porno at the time. Not all of it though. I mean, Franco Franco did a lot of kind of films which were sort of I'd describe as erotica rather than sleaze. Um, his finest, obviously, being Venus in Furs, in my opinion, at least. Um, when he had the chance and he had the will, he would make a damn good film. And he's got several films which are kind of very, very good, just didn't have an awful lot of budget. And it's not to say that he didn't make his trash, because he did. He really did. You just look at my Nasties reviews of a lot of the films. Although, Bloody Moon sort of became one of those things that became a guilty pleasure. First time I saw it, was what the fuck am I watching? And I'd seen that and Devil Hunter and all the ones on the Nasties list, and it's like, holy shit. Who's your favourite director? That's probably David Lynch. I think I'd have to give it to David Lynch. But there's some really cool directors out there that just don't get much love, or are kind of panned for whatever reason that I really enjoy. I describe the straight story to the Lynch movie you can show your mother. It's a damn fine film, though. That is a damn fine film. If you haven't seen it, and it's one of those that I put off for the longest time, because I was like, how the hell is this going to be interesting? But the characters, again, it's literally the most important thing, in my opinion, in any film is characters. They are the things that can bring an otherwise good movie down, or lift a very bad movie up. More than anything, characterization is so fucking important, because you can shift character, kind of like these sort of avatars, these puppets around and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I always felt with, like, the DC films, like, as a for instance. I always found the Marvel characters a lot more interesting. When you have good characters, you can really, really tell a story. So you've got characters and the perspective, but the perspective, i.e. the point of view from that the film's taking, when it does take a single person's point of view or a group's point of view, and that's all coloured by the characters, how they see the world and all that kind of stuff, and how they interact is very, very important. And The Ninth Configuration is one of those films that really does have amazing characters, as does Exorcist 3. David Lynch has a YouTube channel in which he gives a daily weather report. Yes, I have heard of that, although I think he was still doing that. I thought he'd stopped doing it and then maybe temporarily restarted it. Yeah. Sam Raimi, I'm always a little bit kind of like hit or miss on. I do enjoy Sam Raimi's better films. I think he was more interesting as an independent filmmaker than he is as a Hollywood guy. Same with Peter Jackson. Wouldn't call Sam an exploitation director. He had his moments. I mean, even what am I talking about? Evil Dead 3 is, part exploitation. It's certainly kind of informed by those kind of films. I don't think I've seen What Did Jack Do. I have seen a bunch of his stuff, like Six Men Getting Sick 6 times. Say that faster, okay? Several times over. Opinions on Scream 5. I haven't seen it. I have no desire to see it. It's like as much as I enjoyed the Marvel films up until kind of Endgame, including, I have no interest in going to see any more Marvel films. Maybe one will sort of come out. Maybe I'll watch the Spider-Man thing if it appears on Prime or something. But I don't really. Oh yeah, the chances are the only time I'm going to watch it is if I go over to my brother's and he's bought it or something. Oh, I wouldn't say David Cronenberg's an exploitation director. Look at Crash and Videodrome, Fly and The Brood. It depends on what your definition of exploitation film is, to a degree. I wouldn't say he was an exploitation director, although he uses a lot of the same tools as an exploitation director in terms of kind of visuals and that kind of stuff. But I think he uses it with such focus. There's a reason behind the violence in his films. I mean, he's just doing a new film called Crimes of the Future, which is, same title as one of his early short films. When I heard about that, I was very much like, really? They're going to remake Crimes of the Future? Because that is one of his films that I don't think you could make now. Not without an awful lot of accusatory fingers being pointed at you. If you know the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's that ending. The whole point of that film, it puts up a huge moral quandary. It sort of faces you with something that university everybody's going to go, that's awful. You can't do that. That's inhuman. But it's also the thing that would save humanity. So it's like, do you do it? The new Texas Chainsaw Massacre looks fucking awful. And well, don't tell me there's a new one, please, God. See, this is one of those things. It's like, God, why? Why keep remaking those films? And why do we keep going and watching them? It's just such an awful thing. It's such an awful thing. David Lynch was very salty regarding 2021 Dune. He hated his experience in making Dune so much he wanted to Alan Smithy it. Yeah, he did with the altered version. Yeah, yeah, he did not enjoy it. He did not enjoy that film. He had a very bad experience, and it was, partly studio interference and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Crimes of the Future was so fucking boring. It's not an easy film to sit through. But a lot of David Cronenberg's stuff, relatively speaking, isn't. And it's an experimental film in many respects as well. But if you can get past the slow pace, what it is actually quite interesting. In fact, it's very interesting when you get into the kind of nitty gritty of it. But it is ponderous, to say the least. You liked Hollywood 2018, but the new trope of ignoring sequels and reboot and softly associate. Now, it is boring, isn't it, really? It's like, kind of like, how the hell do you keep track of these things? And Halloween is particularly bad for it, but I think because Halloween is a very small story. It has the same problem that Star Wars does. Star Wars, even during the original trilogy, was running out of places to go. Let's be honest, by the time it reached Return of the Jedi, it was like all the fucking ideas were having to be recycled, and then George Lucas started kicking in the fucking Ewoks and shit like that because he wanted to make it more family friendly and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, then he goes down back and does the prequels, and the prequels, I know a lot of people love the prequels. For me, I find them pointless. Absolutely pointless. I don't think it does a damn thing for the original trilogy. And that really wasn't George Lucas's plan anyway, was to do anything for the original trilogy. Although he went back to the original trilogy and started kind of altering stuff and putting Hayden Christensen in the final scene and stuff like that, which is like kind of, and this is not to dunk on that actor, but that film was that film. He was not in that film, and then suddenly gets digitally inserted into this. It's very, very intrusive. And I think a lot of what George Lucas and Hollywood in general, what he did with what he has been doing with those films, really kind of highlights Hollywood's attitude towards film. Me and Kerry been chatting about a new Exorcist film. What would be my idea for a new Exorcist film? Resurrect Blatty and get him to write it. It's as simple as that. I think when it comes to The Exorcist, I think a lot of people get the wrong idea about it. As a series of films, and you can see the mistakes being made in like the prequels and things like that. They lose what the story's actually about. Or they don't really have an idea beyond possession and exorcism. Because that's not what the film is about. The film is about more important things than that. That just happens to be the mechanism by which the story is told. Is this kind of thing sort of... this event is what tests the characters. And if you're going to do something like Halloween or something like that, for instance, I think it would be a case of going back to the original and kind of finding something in that film that really kind of is worth exploring. And I don't know how much of it could be, because essentially the most valuable thing that's in the original, other than it being a something of a fun ride, really, is that there's this sort of childhood trauma thing going on. And this is kind of true of several of the characters, not least Michael, obviously. There's a trauma, he murdered his sister and her boyfriend, but there's a trauma thing with him that's going on. It's unexplained at that during the event, but it sort of translates on a little bit further. Oh, take it easy, Adam. And with Laurie later on, she becomes almost childlike, when she's saved at the end and that kind of stuff. If I was looking at it, I'd look at it in those kind of terms. The Exorcist, I think, as the stories go, because like I say, if you're really kind of looking at The Exorcist, you have to kind of, as a series, you kind of almost have to ignore Exorcist 2. It's a standalone film. It's a very, very different film. So you're looking at, kind of a film about faith, the existence of God, the nature of evil, and the power of humanity apart from anything else. So in each of the films, which is like The Exorcist, The Ninth Configuration, and Exorcist 3, those things are kind of big things. There's that speech in the third one where he's like kind of like, I believe in filth, I believe in slime, I believe in hate and pain, and it's like, that's what that story's about. Not just The Exorcist 3, but all of them. That's the crux of what these things are about. So if you're going to make a Exorcist the final chapter, then you really, if you want to kind of like get into what The Exorcist is about, the nitty gritty of this stuff, then that's where you need to be kind of looking, in my opinion. There's an implication that his sister molested him in the novel anyway. Yeah, I never read the novel, and I don't think you should have to read the novel to be able to watch the film. Yeah, it provides a bit more insight, but that would have been an interesting thing to have actually kind of had in the film. At least a suggestion of it. Just find the original Crimes of the Future here on YouTube, may give it a go. Make sure you're watching it when you're kind of like got enough energy to. It's not an easy watch. It's not to dissuade you from watching it, but it's a pretty hard film to sit through. But worth checking out for an early kind of look into the sort of controversial mind of David Cronenberg, how he likes to kind of explore these very, very difficult questions. It's funny that Rob Zombie gets dunked on when there's the implication that Myers was molested by his sister. I think it's more the way he does it It's a shame. Rob Zombie, right? I've spoken my mind on him on a few occasions. I think he's an incredible visual director. But when it comes to writing and when it comes to characterization, he's not very good at all. I think the biggest failure in any of his skill set is really his lack of ability to create characters that are interesting and likable, or not even likable, just that presents something that you can kind of examine and understand. He's not interested in that. The Exorcist play has a sexually graphic scene. Or The Exorcist has a sexually graphic scene. Well, I mean, they toned it down for the film. You read the novel and it's like kind of, ooh, that's a little too much information. John says, I have to admit I have a great love of novelizations of trashy movies. They can be fun. And it is an interesting way to sort of expand the world of the film. And that's the thing with Blatty in particular. As a director in particular, his films run like they're done by a writer. There's something about the nature of the way he handles characters and situations and scenes and stuff like that which feel more literary than they do necessarily kind of standard film kind of presentation. And I like that because he's so much more interested in characters. Regarding animal deaths, it is of course contemptible if animals are killed for a film, but in Italian films animal deaths tended to be normal. Slaughtering for food just happened to be filmed. Yes and no. I mean, they'd often plan something and they go, yeah, well, we might as well eat it because how the hell else so we're going to get rid of this pig or whatever. But Italian films had a penchant for kind of just not caring about animals. What was it, Night of 1,000 Cats or something like that? Hugo Stiglitz. It's kind of infamous. Glenn, you was on about Star Wars prequel. The Exorcist ones were both terrible. Yeah, yes. I'm trying to remember the name of the director of the other. Hang on a second. Exorcist anthology. So, does it say? So you got like the Exorcist, the beginning, and Exorcist, the Dominion, the prequel. I can't remember the directors of that. Rennie Harlin, I think, was one. I can't remember the other one. The one that wasn't Harlin was actually quite interesting, but it's definitely Paul Schrader. Thank you. The Paul Schrader one was interesting, but it's a very incomplete film because bear in mind we weren't supposed to see that version. So there's unfinished special effects. There's scenes which aren't quite complete. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in that production. Then Rennie Harlin took over and refilmed about 80% of the film or something like that, even more. And it was like, yeah. But the Paul Schrader one is closest to being a good one. It's just a bit of a mess because I think it's a very incomplete film. But again, I don't think they're necessary. I think, as I remember, and it's been a long time since I've seen it, Paul Schrader's one came the closest to kind of approaching kind of questions that the original Exorcist kind of posed. And the Rennie Harlin one was just a kind of like sexed up version. But they're both pretty bad when it comes down to it. Brood is one of my favourites. Fortunate to own the Japanese VHS in perfect condition. Okay. Still find it fascinating how Deodato managed to get the Amazonians to act out horrific scenes. There is a documentary which you can buy, where a guy goes back to the Amazon where they filmed it and meets a few of the cast members, the Amazonian guys. And it's quite interesting what they had to say. Most of them seem to be kind of like very happy. They were very pleased to be involved with the film. Thought it was a bit excessive in the gore and that kind of stuff, but at least one of them, who plays one of the young guys in the film, makes a living of taking people to the shoot sites. Although, like the documentarian in it kind of like says, it's hard to tell whether it is or not because it's all kind of changed. Die Hard 2. You know what? I just rewatched Die Hard 2 recently. And I was actually shocked how fucking terrible a film it is in some respects. I mean, it's fun, don't get me wrong. But my God, it just gets so many things wrong. It really does take a lot of artistic license with reality, shall we say. You know what? I haven't watched Cruising. I've been meaning to watch it for years. Barry, my friend Barry, is a big fan of that film. He thinks it's a magnificent film. So I'd be interested to watch it. Particularly on his suggestion. Excuse me. You like DVD a lot, those, but those VHS and LDs. How's that? This feels real to me. Yeah, they do. For certain types of films. I think some films that have really magnificent cinematography and are kind of like not low budget exploitation films benefit from the kind of higher quality production, that your visuals that you'll get from better quality media. But when it comes down to a film like I don't know, Driller Killer, there's nothing that Blu-ray's going to offer you. Brad Jones saying he was almost an X-ray in Cruising when he drunkenly walked into a gay BDSM club makes me found laughter. Yeah, definitely going to have to watch that film at some point. Animal Cruelty and Cannibal Holocaust is horrible, but it's still a solid... It's a really well-made film. I think, it's Deodato's best by a long shot. And yes, the Animal Cruelty is not pleasant. But yeah. I think it was back when Pacino was actually a good actor. Richard asked John, "Have you ever seen Faces of Death?" Yeah, I've seen it. I think I've seen all the 3 original ones. I did have a conversation with the director at one point. Just a bit of back and forth over emails and messages, whatever. It's a more interesting film than it's given credit for, but it is still, exploitation primarily. You have a friend who still has a large Betamax collection. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. No, it's bad enough that I got VHS. But that's one thing. I mean, we're getting into the realms of physical media, the seismic change, whether it was Betamax or VHS or it was Laserdisc or any of the formats, CED, even VHS in particular, or video cassette and more generally, was such a huge seismic change to how we watch movies and massively changed the scene in terms of film preservation apart from anything else. because I know people get annoyed occasionally when you get those kind of like with those films that have extra bits put in. He goes, well, we had to apologise because we sourced it off of VHS. It just shows, when you've got cassettes out there in collectors' hands, that they become a valuable resource. And I think this whole move to digital is going to be terrible for film preservation. Absolutely. I think we're going to lose a lot along the way. Especially when you're talking about alternate cuts and all that kind of stuff. I think they will. Eventually, it will cause a problem because one of the biggest mechanics of this whole kind of digital delivery sort of thing is that it means it has to be on somebody's server, taking up however many hundreds of gigabytes, whatever, and that costs money. And people don't think of it in that terms, that storage costs money, but it does. Maintaining servers, maintaining the files, making sure they're backed up, looking after them in that kind of respect. And it's something that companies will eventually just let go. I mean, people look at Amazon and go, like, it's all this stuff on there. Yeah, but if they're the only ones, are they going to keep files on their servers that nobody's really watching? Supposedly, they get a few views per year, something like that. Richard says, I remember you doing a massive angry rant about director's cuts on DVD and not at the cinema. Yeah. Yeah. And actually, a lot of it is to do with because of how a lot of these things come around. I have no doubt that the directors want the director's cut to be the one in the cinema. I can't imagine too many directors would be like, kind of, yeah, it's fine, let's put out an inferior version. It's like, and apart from anything else, there's a couple of reasons why it's done. The studios want a certain rating. Is the primary one. So they don't want to go to NC-17 and they don't want to go R-rated in the States, because that cuts down your audience, and they want that first dip to be a very big dip. And the other thing is it's what you could call double dipping, in that the film companies and they go, yeah, you want to see the real version of this film? You paid money for that at the cinema. Oh, you haven't seen the entire film. So it's studio bollocks at the end of the day. And that's why I really, really despise the fucking studio system. If we could lose Sony, Paramount, yeah, fuck it, let's put Marvel. Get rid of Disney, and a whole bunch of the others. Just get rid of them. Open up their studios, kind of like with an independent body that allows all sorts of filmmakers to use those things. Take the sort of budget that you'll spend on a tentpole film and then give it out to 10, 20 other films and see if they can make a damn good film. I know, it's a curmudgeon-y sort of thing to say, but yeah. Didn't grow up with much physical media, says Kerry. Only had 5 VHS. First DVDs were American History and Blade, which got in 2000, 21 years later. 2,797 DVDs. I have no idea how many DVDs I have and Blu-rays I have either. But I think most people would be like kind of shocked how few it is, considering what I do. I tend to be quite selective. I wish I hadn't got rid of a load of my old VHS. I kind of had to get rid of them when I was going to university. And I couldn't be carting them up to Yorkshire and back. Going to say something controversial. I grew up with the voiceover version of Blade Runner. Some people do. And to be honest, maybe it was helpful to a lot of people. I know there was a lot of critical backlash to the voiceover version. They're going, oh, it's pandering to a stupid audience, or it's condescending. It's like, a lot of the sort of people that were going to watch Blade Runner were the sort of people that would watch Star Wars. And Blade Runner, as much as I'm not much of a fan of Blade Runner, is a somewhat loftier film. And they just wanted to make sure that it was comprehensible what was going on to a very ordinary audience. So I can understand why they did it. Was it the right thing for the movie? Probably not. Was it the right thing for a lot of the audience? Possibly. Kieran says I have 525 or so movies in my collection now. I'm probably... No, I can't even... I'm not even going to guess. You know, a YouTuber in real life, she has loads of movies, mostly obscure Asian films. I think I know who you're talking about. Are there collectors of markets of Razzle magazine? Probably. Probably. There's people who collect 70s porn, from the golden era. Remember when I was a kid that we still had some video cassettes? We had old Thunderbirds episodes. Well, I used to have like about a couple of hundred tapes of stuff taken off the telly. That stuff I wish I still had. Ordinary? You mean morons? No. Actually, I mean, partly my opinion on the general audience is that you can't expect them to watch a movie in the same way that someone like I would watch a movie. That's not to say, to big myself up, but I watch movies in a very different way to a lot of people. Very analytical. I tend to have certain expectations, and I'm looking for certain things. Whereas most audience members are kind of happy to go along and munch on the popcorn and just enjoy the thrill ride, which is fair enough to an extent. I wish it was that they were a lot more cine literate, and I think actually that's one of the things I've mentioned before, is I think media studies is something that should be held in much higher regard than it is, because the same kind of analysis that I would apply to a film, I'll apply to a documentary or a news piece or that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, Hollywood in particular has had a tendency to really they've dumbed people down over the decades, and I think this is probably from the 80s onwards. Movies generally, it's probably not even fair to put that date on it, but the vast majority of the movies that come out are kind of like, they're there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to make money for the studios. They don't really care about how good it is. When you look at stuff like we were just talking about, the fact that they will hack a movie to pieces to get a lower rating, or put a F-bomb in to try and hike it up to make it seem more kind of out there than it is. But generally speaking, it's pretty vanilla. That shows how they kind of regard these things, in my opinion. So when they kind of set something out, it's all usually very focus tested. It's kind of like, checked to be that it's media and audience friendly as it can be. It's as inoffensive as it needs to be, and all that kind of stuff. And that's why they're struggling with a lot of this backlash at the moment. But they only care about the return. That's it. The studios don't care if you've made a good film. They just go, well, it's competently made, and I'll rattle the keys in front of the plebeians' faces for a couple of hours. You know, yeah, yeah. But they've essentially dumbed down the audience bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. So an audience's expectations are lowered, and this is one of the things I've always argued with the kind of like, you know, the fans of DC who have taken objection to my opinion on those films, is that I want those films to be good. I want them to be good for you. You know, not in a kind of like, oh, it's highbrow and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I think what they do with the characters is important. We should be able to care about the characters, like them, like the things that they do, or if they do bad things, we should know why and kind of figure out things and that kind of stuff. It should be quality, with whatever it's doing. And it's so much of it has just felt like it's this kind of near worthless kind of effort. You know, it's certainly in terms of what it's giving back to you. And Marvel, for all its faults, has done a much better job of making journeys for at least, you know, a few of the characters that have been interesting, which is why I kind of went that way. At the beginning, I would have been DC guy. But studios have done this. They've kicked out these various things and kind of encouraged the audience into the lower common to want the lower common denominator. You look at all the English language remakes of films like, you know, the girl with the dragon tattoo and things like that. And why is it that that's necessary? Why is it that we don't have a general audience that is capable or has any desire to sit through a film that has subtitles? Just as for instance. And there's always that much derided thing of the remake, the shot-for-shot remake of Psycho. And I actually believe the director when he kind of like Gus Van Sant. I actually believe the director when he said, I deliberately did that because I wanted to show how fucking pointless it was, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah. Yeah, it's like, why would you want to watch that one rather than the original? DC Frank says, I'm a big DC fan, but Marvel did much better with live action films as it irritates me. Yeah. And that's the thing. When it came to those kind of films, I want them to be good. I know it's a little bit kind of hit or miss, but the Christopher Nolan Batman films, generally speaking, had a lot going for them, even in their weaker moments. Interesting characters, interesting situations. Not necessarily true to the comic book Batman, but kind of pushing in that direction. You know, I mean, I had somebody say, "Oh yeah, I want to see Batman do some detective stuff," and I kind of like racking my brains trying to think of how many of the comic books actually had like kind of hardcore detective action going on in them. You know, it's like, okay, do you still get called a Marvel fanboy? Well, I haven't, not for a long time, but the thing is, I'm such a Marvel fanboy. I'm kind of like looking at the new Spider-Man movie, going, can't be bothered. I was caught up with a lot of the stuff that was going on with that one. I got invested in it. I enjoyed it for the most part. A few weak elements. I've always said that, you know, the Captain Marvel film was at best meh. At worst, deeply disrespectful to the rest of the Marvel universe, which is what makes it a bad movie for me. But yeah. Talking about English remake of films, I think it's important to watch a foreign movie without subtitles. It sets the mood more. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you're getting the original performance when you watch. When you watch with subtitles, I don't think you can watch them without subtitles, particularly. Otherwise, it'd be almost utterly meaningless unless it's very specific type of film. Some films you can get away with it, but it's very, very rare. But yeah. But watching the original, absolutely. Expand your mind a bit and see how other countries are telling stories. I think that's something which I think is important. Now, I'm not saying I sit down and watch a foreign art house film every other day, but it's something I do occasionally. I will happily sit through like Holy Motors in its original language. Yeah. Enjoyed the Matrix, new Matrix more than the Spider-Man film. I don't think I would enjoy the new Matrix film, but I haven't enjoyed the Matrix film since the first one. Daniel Blake was terrible. Glenn, I know we disagree on it. I think it was a mistake to make live-action comic book films. Animated films seem to be a much more appropriate medium. That's a fair enough opinion. I don't think there's a problem with doing live-action films of any kind of genre of source material. But I think a lot of it is down to how you make it. What is your intent with the story? And again, I think it's first of all, have a point. Second of all, respect the characters. And I think, whatever you do with the characters, it doesn't mean that you don't have to question a character's motivations and all that kind of stuff. But have purpose in that. Have a reason for that, and really kind of work to justify it within the story. You can do whatever you want, to a great extent. But it's just it's not getting lazy in the story making. I think that's where it's a real kind of important. You prefer the US version of The Ring. Actually, that's probably not surprising, because I think the two have some significant differences. And apart from anything else, that J-Horror kind of stuff, what a lot of people don't realise is the J-Horror kind of genre generally relies on an awful lot of cultural context. So it's very difficult necessarily for a mainstream horror fan in any given country to kind of appreciate it unless they kind of want to sit down and go out their way to really give it a chance to do its thing. But even then, they don't necessarily capture all the reasoning behind it. It's a particularly interesting genre in that respect, just because it's usually tied in so heavily with like local folklore and things like that, local symbology. I don't know what the situation is with French filmmaking at the moment. There's been some great stuff from France, but it's been from a lot of countries. There's some great Spanish cinema, great Italian cinema, great German cinema. Any given country usually has something really worthwhile. There's like Iranian films that are worth watching, for God's sake. It's like, and often a lot of these countries that have kind of very small kind of resources in terms of money and that kind of stuff and support, or ones where they're working in very difficult circumstances, which could be political circumstances for one thing, can come out with some of the most incredible cinema. What do you think of the Evil Dead remake? You mean that one? Still got the stickers all over it. I have to say I generally enjoyed it. Do I prefer the original? Yes, I prefer the original. But I think they went down a different enough path with that and kind of made it their own. I mean, let's be absolutely honest. Even the original Evil Dead, the story is not the most original thing. It's kind of the way that they told it, which was very original. Even that's kind of questionable, though, isn't it? Because I mean, it's sort of Three Stooges and a lot of Sam Raimi's influences, but it's a very original kind of film. It's just that the story is very basic. But yeah, but they did some interesting things with it. I don't think it was entirely worthless, and I probably enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. But it's not to say it's an amazing film either. A great Iranian film. This is not a film. Yes, hugely political, fascinating. Um, it's a real kind of almost like a fingers up to the people who jailed him there. For those who don't know, it's basically a director in real life who was banned from filmmaking. But he worked his way around the judgment in terms of he wasn't handling the camera, he wasn't leaving his home, he wasn't doing this, that, or the other, and he kind of worked his way around. Do you think Evil Dead 2 is sort of a remake? Yes, I think it's more of a re-envisioning maybe than a remake. Although, you know, Bruce Campbell said it is a sequel, and the character was that stupid that he would go back, and I think he was taking the piss, to be honest. It's Bruce Campbell. He's not always the most honest actor when it comes to kind of like being able to take him for at his word in those kind of things, because I think he was taking the piss when he said it. I reckon he did. Right, be right back. Beer. Oh yeah. Haven't touched Iranian cinema. Really need to. It's not to say that every piece of Iranian cinema is going to be interesting, but what I would say is that when you're looking at countries like that have political struggles, you know, I would imagine there's probably in China. For instance, there's probably an underground filmmaking community who's churning out some really interesting stuff. But yeah, here's a hard question. What in your opinion is the best remake? I'd probably go with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or The Thing. I tried to squeeze it through the microphone to you, but yeah, Holy Grail tonight. I managed to make it last. Oh dear. But yeah, when it comes to that kind of cinema, there's interesting stuff going on. Even in the States, it's like with the there's a fairly vibrant independent cinema scene in the States, and for whatever you know, love him or hate him, and a lot of people hate him, you know, Harmony Korine, as for instance, is somewhat of an interesting filmmaker in some respects, even if you don't particularly like his work. The Thing is not a remake. Well, it sort of is. It's just it kind of got realigned to be more in line with the novel. Chinese film is very propaganda based. Don't get to see underground film from there. Generally speaking, not, no. But I can almost guarantee you there'll be a kind of reverse of that. But propaganda filmmaking is an interesting thing in its own right. You know, there's a reason why the likes of Leni Riefenstahl, I probably just butchered the name, but there's a reason why her work was kind of considered to be fascinating cinema, despite how horrific its purpose was. The Blob remake, that is a damn good one. I do love the Blob remake. It's far more interesting than the original, although the story behind the original is interesting enough in its own right. I'd be interested to see, like, kind of like with Russia, if there's a underground kind of filmmaking community who's working against the political climate. I imagine that would be quite dangerous. You think the hardest to watch is Chinese film is Men Behind the Sun? Yes, that's a pretty difficult one. A lot of people dismiss it um, as being a gore film, and it's so much more than that. You know, it's essentially a dramatized documentary or a dramatized document of what did happen. But the Nanjing Massacre, Black Sun, that's a equally fascinating one. In fact, probably more interesting on a historical basis. Quite possibly. Remember, I had a course on propaganda and film and watched extracts from Jutsus, a stupefying anti-Semitic movie. And took a couple of scenes to make my blood boil in anger. Reprehensible. I think one of the hardest ones I've watched was probably Nuit et Brouillard, Night and Fog. Um, yeah. I mean, that is, in some respects, could be classified as being in part propaganda and part documentary. Um, but the thing is, propaganda can have good uses as well as bad. And Ria Brilliant is tough. It's basically about the concentration camps and stuff like that. What they found. Made, I think, very shortly after and featuring kind of like documentary footage from. It's pretty horrifying, to say the least. Blood of Beasts. I remember watching Blood of Beasts at university. And I can't remember quite why it was we ended up watching it. But we were all kind of ushered into this big, one of the big spaces that had a projector. And it wasn't just film studies. But it was for something else, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was for exactly. I think we might have been doing something on documentary and stuff like that. And we had to sit down and watch this film. He's going, look, I appreciate that some of you will find this very, very difficult to watch. You may not want to watch it. You may want to walk out right now, or if you walk out halfway through, we totally understand. I think it was like about me and 10 other people left by the end of it, out of like about 30 people. What do you think of Russian films? Saw one recently called Super Deep, obviously inspired by the thing, not sure what to think about. Russian films can be quite difficult to sit through. There's an austerity about Russian films, and just Russians in general. Because they're a very kind of closed off kind of character compared to Western cultures, generally speaking. And that's not to say they're not friendly, cause perfectly friendly people. But when you're watching these films, it can be quite difficult. Because there's this wall of quite cold and hard nature that you have to sort of push through. And that's quite tricky for to get used to. I got Stalker up there somewhere. Where did I put it? It's up there somewhere. Yeah, I've got Stalker up there. I've got the like Criterion collection of it. I think it is, or it's Cine Eye or something like that. I don't know. It's quite a good version of it. It's an interesting film, but it is one of those that you kind of look at and you wouldn't even have to. If it was an English dubbed one, you'd recognise it as being Russian. I can't remember. Was I watched a film? I think it was called The Ark, Tarkovsky. When I was at doing film studies, and it was like, oh god, that was so hard to sit through. It's very, very, very kind of reserved kind of feel to it. Watched a Russian sci-fi recently. Can't remember the name. It wouldn't have been Solaris, would it, Kerry? Have you seen Titicut Follies? I think I did, but yeah, a long time ago. Faces of Death is great. It's a bit of a push to say it's great, but it has some interesting aspects. Actually, I mean, the whole kind of Mondo genre is kind of coloured by this whole sort of thing where it's like it's both fascinating and boring at the same time. Because an artificial eye, I think that might be the one. Let's see what's up there. It's got to be up there somewhere. I must have hidden it. Yeah. Anyway, it's up there. Actually, talking about good films, I rewatched Pig yesterday. That's such a good film. It's such a good film. I know Simon would disagree because it's got Nick Cage in it, but Tarkovsky didn't make the arc. I can't remember what it's. Let's see. Yeah, it was. Bear in mind, I mean, this is like about 2001. I saw this, or 2002. Was it The Mirror or something like that? Tarkovsky. Yeah, The Mirror. Mixing up my Russian directors. Who made Russian Ark anyway? That was an interesting film. We sort of Alex. Oh no, it's narration by. Yeah, Russian Ark was a film that was made. It's kind of a one-take thing. Alexander Sukharov. Okay. Yeah, Russian Ark was an interesting one in terms of kind of how it was made. Literally couldn't have been made earlier than it was because the technology didn't exist to be able to do what they wanted to do. We're talking about camera technology because it's done as one take throughout the entire film, and it goes through this museum and follows this story around these various kind of displays and stuff, and sort of slips in and out of time. But yeah, is the original Solaris better than the remake? A lot of people would say yes. I think the American version not only cuts a lot out, but kind of waters it down for a American audience. It's often the case, although there's an argument to say that when they do that, it kind of opens up people's willingness to go visit the original. Although so many of those people who watch that film will never bother looking for the original or even necessarily be aware that the one that they're watching is a remake. Speaking of propaganda, I heard in Bin Laden's compound they found a copy of Loose Change. Should have waited 10 minutes before killing it to get his opinion. Oh dear. Can you imagine being Bin Laden and sitting and watching that documentary and just kind of going, okay. Have you ever seen a film where the dubbed version is better than the subtitled ones? You know what? I don't know. M comes pretty close to being kind of like good neither version. That's here. This So this has got like the dubbed and the German language version on it. It's pretty good either way. Depends kind of what mood I'm in. Sometimes I just want to sort of sit down and kind of not have to read. Sometimes a dubbed version does kind of help out with that. I think with a lot of the really low budget films that I've got, certainly some of the Jess Franco stuff works better as dubbed versions than it does in its original language. Although Italian cinema is kind of interesting in that respect, particularly Italian cinema. In that a lot of that Euro sleaze kind of stuff, and in fact not just Euro sleaze, but Euro low budget films, and even big budget films like Salo and things. I say bigger budgets, films like Salo and things like that. They had a very international cast, and they would speak in their own languages. So they're by just kind of like by a normal process, they have to ADR everything essentially. They have to go and dub it all over. So, you sort of go, well, kind of got to watch whatever Italian film in the original language, and it's never quite like that. You look at Dario Argento's films like Deep Red and things like that. It's like the only surviving parts of certain scenes were in the original Italian language, and obviously there's no opportunity to overdub those, because the original actors are either dead or they're aged so much that their voices have changed. So you get this kind of weird sort of jumping around between kind of languages and things like that. Would I want to watch most of the Dario Argento films in Italian when the actors aren't necessarily talking Italian? As long as they manage to convey the meaning of what's going on, and it depends on the circumstances. I think certain films, a film like Holy Motors is a good example. I think it's one of those that benefits from listening to it in its original language. Because the acting in it is so good that you get the point of what's going on. Through because the acting is, even if you don't understand the words that are being spoken necessarily, you get the point of what the performer is doing. And then there's other films that Richard says, I watched Salo. Oh my god, I was ill. It's a pretty strong film. You imagine how many times I've said it before. I watched it 8 times to do the review, at least 8 times. Possibly more. Have you ever played the game Return of Obra Dinn? It's quite an interesting, unique game, and would actually make a fascinating art house film. No, I don't. I don't know anything about that. To my knowledge, very few of the Italian directors, especially in genre films, actually spoke English. Not many of them did. No. They occasionally had translators on site to talk to like American or English actors who wouldn't necessarily speak Italian. Although the interesting one in that respect was when they did Troll 2, and it's like they clearly the translation had been done by someone who wasn't a big English speaker, or at least primarily an English speaker. And the director absolutely insisted that the performers, and he's not the only one, it's happened many, many times, they insisted that they speak every word on the script, word for word. Because I guess they didn't want them sort of improvising and screwing everything up when it comes to the editing the film, because he couldn't necessarily sit there and understand what it was they were doing and what they were saying if it wasn't already written down in front of them. Which is why that film has such legendarily bad line reads. Tell your film really hated watching The Bunny Game. Yeah, it's a pretty horrible film. I kind of took against it on the review that I did quite severely, because I mean, apart from anything else, I think it was a very, very irresponsible film. Although they go, yeah, you know, she consented to this, that, and the other. Everybody kind of said it was okay and that kind of thing. But I still don't think you should be branding someone for a film. Call me old-fashioned and oversensitive, if you will. Yeah, Bunny Game did not get a certificate in this country, and it's not surprising. Given what it is doing in the film and the way it depicts it, and the fact that they're literally harming the actress on set in front of the camera, despite her, like I say, despite her consent to it, it's not something that the BBFC would take kindly to. Besmois. That was one of those films that I kind of... I mean, essentially it's Thelma and Louise in a gritty French style. And not done as well, because the characters aren't that interesting. Oh, I take it you mean the Bunny Game there, King Liam. Yeah, I don't think there was any kind of like... actual sexual activity. I think it was all simulated, but there's things about how the film's put together that the BBFC really kind of looked at it and went, it's close enough to being porn to actually kind of have that effect. I think that was one of the things that they took objection to. That's one of the things they tried to go, you know, is it likely? It's like with the Video Recordings Act. Or the Obscene Publications Act, is it likely to kind of adversely affect a significant portion of the people who would be likely to watch it? And they kind of look at it in that sort of respect. You know, is this healthy? You can argue whether or not that's a good thing for them to be looking at, whether they should be looking at that. But that's one of the law elements of what they do. Do you think the BBFC have got better since Furman left? I think when Furman left, they lost a lot of baggage. I think that was a very good thing. I think how clear they are with, you know, how transparent they are was took a really big knock when it came to things like the website. I think that information of exactly what is cut, when it was cut, you know, kind of what versions are out there, all that kind of stuff was incredibly important. It's very useful information, and now so much of it is just very, very difficult to get hold of. Well, I thought the point of porn was to titillate and entice. Movies like Besmois does quite the opposite. It does for most people, but what they kind of look at, the BBFC, are particularly concerned with depictions that would appeal to a certain demographic, shall we say. And one of the things that they have, they kind of push back against his normalization of extreme sexual acts and things like that. What's most interesting is kind of like when you look at how they censor R18 stuff, and R18 is one of those categories that a lot of people really kind of don't know about, or they've only vaguely heard about it. Now, R18 is essentially, for those who don't know, it's the category that can only be sold in porn shops, essentially, adult shops. They can only be sold over the counter, they can't be sold over the internet. So you have to be face-to-face with somebody who can recognise you for being of a certain age, you know, of a consenting adult. And as I understand it, last time I looked, R18 was one of the most heavily cut categories in all of the categories. It's kind of interesting. It's certainly very, very closely monitored. And they're very, very careful about what they allow through and that kind of stuff. And that was a whole big part of the argument with a lot of changes that were being made was that people thought that they were being overly censorious in that particular area. But the relationship that the BBFC has with kind of regulating pornography and stuff like that is actually quite fascinating. And when you look at like the Video Recordings Act and stuff like that, when that came in, prior to the video nasties, the big hoo-ha was really about pornography. And the House of Commons and the House of Lords, pretty much, the majority of them were like kind of like you can't ban porn. Why? Well, I suspect it's because partly they were consumers of, although they cloaked it in this sort of more libertarian kind of language. But when you had Grey and Bright going on, trying to push for kind of like a ban of pornography on video cassettes and stuff like that, a lot of the people going like, well, you can't regulate an adult's choice and tastes like that. Well, they never applied that to the horror film genre. They never said, pornography. Oh, what if your kids find it? And kind of like, yeah, you've hidden it under your bed or something like that. What if your kids still find it? But they never said that with the horror film stuff. Personally, I think it's an amount of snobbery with the BBFC and similar censoring bodies. They see everyone's great on watch. That's certainly a case in the older times with the BBFC. I think that's probably more applicable to the MPAA these days than it is the BBFC. But there's always going to be a certain aspect of that. Certainly in the, kind of like from the birth of cinema, from 1921-ish, when the BBFC sort of came to be, to probably like the mid-90s, just before Furman, sort of, well, probably even a little bit before then. That was certainly the case. There was certainly an elitism. Yeah, probably up until the end of Furman. They kind of changed the tune an awful lot once Furman went. Oh, you're talking about Hate Crime? Not a great film. It's funny. I mean, because I've had a few kind of like brushes with directors of films like that. Nick Palumbo commented on my review of Murder Set Pieces, which I found fascinating, and because he didn't sort of go, "You don't know what you're fucking talking about." He says, "Well, I'm glad that you at least got to see the uncut version. Thank you for the review," which I thought was incredibly gracious. And it's been one of those funny things that the directors of those types of films tend to be the calmest and most amenable. When you kind of like say that to someone, like a Hollywood director, for instance, if you slam the movie, there's all too often them just throw their toys out the pram. Even face sitting is banned in the UK on film, as I understand. I don't know where where that actually lies. They were talking about it for a long time. There was a whole bunch of things, which was what is it, the Communications Act or something like that. I did a video on it, and there was a whole list. There was a shopping list of things that you couldn't depict on the internet, squirting, face sitting, and this and that and the other. And as far as I understand, it didn't go through, because part of the problem was, this has always been the problem, is age gating the internet is very, very difficult. It's incredibly difficult because, especially when you're talking about stuff like porn, when you get into porn, things like that, and you're having to sign up with a credit card, it opens you up to potentially being kind of blackmailed and all sorts of stuff like that. And they couldn't really kind of find a way to to make a safe way of dealing with that kind of stuff. So it sort of fell through, and parts of it sort of went through, and it's like it's kind of weird. But you can watch that sort of shit on the internet anyway, still. So quite surprised by Palumbo being quite charitable. If you read his director's note for Nutbag and some post-production stuff on SP, sound like a total dick. Well, I wouldn't know about that. I can only really sort of speak to what he happened to say. There's always a way to do a home invasion movie about Jewish and Nazis, but that was fortunate. You know what the biggest problem with hate crime was? It wasn't so much that... I don't think the intent was bad. I honestly don't. I don't think the intent was bad, but the problem was it wasn't a scripted piece. They had an outline for a story, and then they improvised it, and I think that was deeply, deeply ill-advised. Because I don't think they really could handle it particularly well. Oh my god, Murder Set Pieces, that movie was pure cringe. It wasn't a great movie. Remember Megan is Missing? I bored the piss out of me. So I was recommended it. I've got it. It's still up there somewhere. I did not enjoy. I mean, not that you're necessarily supposed to enjoy it, but I didn't appreciate the film. Remember how the director tried to defend teen rape as a PSA on teenagers being groomed? I seem to remember they kind of went up with like a cautionary tale kind of stuff, but I thought it was just... It's found footage. I struggle with found footage films. There's a few which are good, but yeah. And that's the thing. I was like, hate crime is a found footage film as well. And they have a tendency to want to go like down the line of Blair Witch, which actually did it really well in my opinion, of improvising everything so it's more real, but forgetting the fact that improv is not an easy thing to do. And the worst part of it is, whatever they improvise, you've got to build upon. So otherwise you end up with junk. You know, you end up with a whole bunch of very kind of sporadic stuff being thrown at the editing suite. So, yeah. First half was found footage, last 30 minutes was porn. I don't remember it well enough for that. I mean, my brain shut down about halfway through it, to be honest with you. Oh, God, I'm so glad that the vast majority of the found footage kind of thing has sort of gone away. It's more the exception than it is the rule these days. I mean, yeah. I mean, I've been watching a few films. I just bring up the list of them. I mean, like I say, Pig, which I watched again just yesterday, is a wonderful little quiet movie. It's not what you would expect. It's a film that kind of starts with the kidnapping of a truffle pig, and Nicolas Cage's character goes off to try to recover the pig because it's a companion to him apart from anything else. Because he's like living out in the woods in a little hut essentially, and he kind of has to revisit his old life. He turns out he's like a chef, a very, very well regarded chef and all that kind of stuff. But there's a whole bunch of stuff which is going on in this. There's a lot of use of food as this kind of way of communication and bridge building and stuff like that. It sounds weird to say it, but it works. You know? and a lot of it's because it's just wonderfully characterized. Have you seen Grave of the Firefly? Glenn is resetting. 3, 2, 1. Have you ever seen Grave of the Fireflies? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I tell you what. I mean, if you're on Facebook with me, I watched Ben the other day, the 1972 made-for-TV movie, apparently, about a killer rat, and it's his relationship with this young lad who befriends him. Weirdest fucking movie ever. I have never seen such a weird tonal kind of clash. Just an absolute lack of self-awareness when it comes to accepting what's going on. This is a movie where, like I say, Ben... It follows on from a film called Willard, which, I don't think really has much of an impact on this film, as far as I'm aware. You can watch Ben on its own and understand what's going on. But Ben's like the king of the rats. He seems to have some sort of domain across the other wild rats. And he uses his power to basically go around and kill a lot of people. Swarms of rats just eating people, that kind of stuff. And for whatever reason, he befriends this young lad, who rapidly becomes aware of what this rat is doing, but still just completely, you're my friend, you're my best friend. So you got this kid who knowingly befriends this murderous creature. And it all ends up with like a bloody police and firemen kind of going through the sewers with flamethrowers, killing all the rats and all this sort of stuff. And it's often peppered with the song Ben, the Michael Jackson one. It's so fucking weird. I just sat there going, huh? Yeah, King Leon's right. It's all bad and the two of us need look no more. Oh my god. It's like one of the most syrupy, saccharine-laced songs ever to grace the charts. And it's literally about a killer rat. What the fuck? Oh, When the Wind Blows. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one, that, because it's a very, very heavily British film. Because for those who haven't seen it, it's an animated feature film. And it's just like these couple of very traditional, old, elderly Yorkshire types, characters, who after the nuclear war are like kind of, buck up lass kind of thing. It'll all be over soon, the government's going to come help us, and of course nobody's coming. It's fucking depressing. What do I think of the Hellraiser films? Love the first one, like the second one. Third one's, take it or leave it. And pretty much the rest of them, whether or not they're good films or bad films, they're barely Hellraiser films. I mean, literally, a load of the sequels, the later sequels, were completely separate scripts. They were completely independent scripts. They weren't Hellraiser films, but they find a way to sort of crowbar Pinhead in once in a while. Michael Jackson did something weird. It was a very sensible decision for him to do that song because it was a hit for him. I think that he pretty much knew that, that song was gold, in terms of, I can sell this. I mean, if that's your kind of thing, it's actually not a bad song. I find it a little bit too, well, I say a little bit, way, way, way too sentimental for my liking. Very syrupy. But it's some real kind of, popularity fodder. Sorry. Which do you think is worse, The Day After or Threads? Threads by a country mile. In terms of how harrowing it is. The Day After. Well, you've seen my review, surely. I guess. But I summed it up by saying the day after ends with a hug, where Threads ends with the muted scream of a woman looking at her damaged child. It's like, holy shit. Yeah. Threads is way, way, way harder to watch. I think it's a much, much more effective film. But that said, The Day After really did, do an important job. It really did. It kind of woke a lot of people up to the reality of nuclear war. MJ was a weird guy. Yeah. I'm not terribly surprised considering his upbringing. But I mean, the nuclear films. I mean, I was at one point going to do like a special on nuclear films and be it TV or film. That would be kind of interesting. It's a huge, deep research kind of thing, though, because you're going back to things like the original Godzilla, stuff like that. There's a lot of it, one way or another. Pinhead versus Myers was a thing they wanted to do for ages. Oh, Jesus. No, I've got so little time for these crossover movies. I find them astonishingly tedious. And it's even like the Freddy versus Jason film, which it has its moments, but it's just moments. You kind of look, you go, well, what is the point of this? And people just wanted to see the toys getting crushed together. It's a very Zack Snyder kind of approach to superhero filmmaking. Oh, so that bit in Shazam. Well, Shazam wasn't it? I'm not fucking up that title. You know, the DC movie. And it's a bit where the two, you got like Shazam and bad guy kind of like fighting and flying around and that kind of stuff. It cuts to this kid in like a high-rise building, kind of like crashing his toys together like this, in front of his big open window, and in the background you got the two characters doing pretty much the same. And I thought that was, God, that actually made me laugh out loud in the cinema. I remember telling my mum after she watched The Day After, do not watch Threads. Yeah, Threads is hard work. It's a thoroughly depressing film. Relentlessly so. The Day After offers you little threads of hope. Threads takes those threads and makes a fucking noose. And I think this, partly down to the sort of optimistic, the kind of audience that you're talking about. You're when you're pointing something like that at an American audience, it's not to say that an American audience is particularly soft, but there's a palatability difference, and I think in Britain we're more used to the dealing with, or at least kind of acknowledging the grimmer side of life. And that's kind of shown in the kind of dramas that we watch, would be EastEnders or Coronation Street or any number of kind of like fictions that people regularly watch, the kitchen sink dramas, that kind of stuff. Some of the more controversial English films, indeed, kind of like some of the writing it's very down to earth, very kind of like facing the worst case scenarios. whereas an American audience like to feel like, you know, there's hope. And I think that's pretty much a demand. That is a generalization. Of course, it's a generalization. But I think that's where Threads gets to have it get its digs in, because it's just fucking hard to watch. I have to sit down and persuade myself to watch it if I'm going to watch it. It's that hard to watch. I would watch Salo twice over before I kind of happily sit down and watch Threads once. uh, where are we? Threads is really realistic. Um, it's grounded in a realism for sure, and actually, I mean, it represents, kind of reproduces a lot of this style that people were familiar with in kind of like the dramas that they would watch, including the kinds of faces that you would see in it. There's a reason why it's set in somewhere like Sheffield, um, because you're not you're not kind of like that represents the largest part of Britain. It's more than just London. A lot of people would have dismissed it and went, I kind of like down south anyway, it'll be fine. Dear, oh dear. Right. Going to take a couple of minutes break and I'll be right back. So go recharge your beers, all that kind of stuff. I'll come back and we'll chat some more. So, yeah, see you in a moment. I'm back again. Hope you've managed to recharge your beers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh boy. I haven't talked this long and solid for such a long time. Surprised I've still got something to say. Grobnob says Threads was well written. Another good UK effort was the 70s Survivors. I haven't seen Survivors. I've been meaning to get hold of a TV series called The Mad Death that's available on DVD, which is another, I think it's BBC, which is about rabies, that kind of stuff. That looks like that should be fairly terrifying as well. We have a penchant in Britain for, at least used to, I don't know as much these days, I haven't watched TV in a long time, for kind of like having these really quite scary PIF style things, and even our PIFs, our public information films, it's kind of the British version of PSAs. Some of those like Apaches and the finishing line and all sorts of play safe. Jesus Christ, those things were absolutely horrifying. Opinions on Scum. You know what? I've never watched Scum. For some reason, it doesn't appeal to me. I struggle with a lot of those. For some reason, I just don't know what it is. The Mad Death. I love that title. I'm pretty sure it's called The Mad Death. Let me just... I've got it on my Amazon wish list, actually. Yeah, it's called Mad Death. TV miniseries, 1983. I do remember there was a lot of these PIFs about kind of rabies and things like that in the country, because we eradicated it in Britain. So there was an awful lot of stuff which was going on in kind of like information films, basically going, don't take your creature, don't take your pet to France or something like that and then bring them straight back. They've got to go into quarantine. And I do remember my stepdad bought, because he'd been working in the Middle East, training dogs and stuff like that for kind of drug searches, that kind of thing. And he bought back this little dog that he got over there, who he called Dixie. And it's just kind of a Pomeranian type thing. She was very small, such a sweet little creature. And he bought her back from there. But incidentally, called Dixie because in the Arab Emirates at the time, they had these little kind of cans of pop called, and they were teeny tiny little things. They're like half the size of a Coca-Cola, and they were called Dixie. It's like Dixie Cola and stuff like that. So he named the dog after a can of pop. Lived in Quebec about 7 years. When I speak French, people think I'm French Canadian. That's one of the things I understand is French Canadian, like French films or French Canadian films in France have to be subtitled because they can't understand them. Ostensibly speaking the same language, so I don't know how different it is, or if it's just an accent. But yeah. Scariest rabies PIF is when the woman comes through customs, intercut with a young boy with rabies. Yeah, one of the things I watched today, I found out, or something like that, a YouTube channel. He did one on rabies. It's like only 6 people have ever survived rabies. Full-blown rabies. Apparently, it's that lethal. Most people, because it's a very slow-acting virus, essentially. So what tends to happen is you get bitten, you get the inoculation against it, you get the vaccine against it, because it's so slow-moving. You can actually vaccinate after being infected. Shocked there wasn't any AIDS-related miniseries. I don't think they could have got away with it. Even back in the day. Yeah, the music was terrible. Rabies means death. Yeah, I remember the posters, especially up in like ports and things like that. Oh, Yellow's a rabies film at heart. So's Cujo. Not Dixie Norms, no. No, the truth is that movies with English titles are always given French alternatives in Quebec. In France, we sometimes get the original title, such as Taken, but not in Quebec. Really? Canadian French has different slang and accent, but the base is the same as European French. They can understand each other. I would imagine subtitles is to make sense of the slang. Ah, interesting. Anyone see the TV show Deadhead? No. No, I haven't. It sounds interesting, though. Hello, Adam. Interesting. Mate of mine's father nearly bought Dixie Colour in the 80s. Really? Dear, oh dear. Yeah, Dubai was where my stepdad was working, actually. We went over to visit, and it's like kind of one of the weirdest experiences. Actually going out into the desert and seeing the sand dunes for real. You see, like on in whatever media, films and stuff like that, you see the sand dunes and stuff like that in these desert scenes and things like that. Seeing the reality is very different. You don't appreciate the scale of those things until you're actually stood at the foot of one. And you've driven past town after town that has been overridden by the dunes. So the well-established houses, kind of, very modest because they're out in the middle of the fucking desert. There's nothing else around them. But, just little villages just swamped by these things. And you stand at the base of these dunes and you're just looking up and up and up and up. And you sort of go, oh, let's have a quick wander up to the top of it. And just like, you get halfway up and it's friggin' exhausting. It is so hot, even in the cool season. Your feet are burning from the heat in the sand. And as you're walking up these things, you take a step and of course your foot kind of comes back a bit because you're stepping in sand. You know how hard it is sometimes how much more effort you have to put into like walking across a sandy beach. Try doing that uphill. And it goes on and on and on and on. And it's at that point you sort of go, now you know why people die so fast in the desert. It's just astonishing. It's astonishing. It's breathtaking. Literally. So lovely seeing you all here again. Fear must be off. Really hope enjoying a watch along with the Scum the movie world very soon. Oh, nice callback, DC Frank. You have a lovely night and Happy New Year, my friend. Yeah, we've all got like 27 minutes before we hit the witching hour. At which point I turn into a pumpkin. Start singing 3 more days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Or except for me, it'll be like kind of like 4 more days till I go back to work. I don't want to go back to work. Be great if I could make a living out of this, wouldn't it? Really. But there you go. So I guess circling back a bit, I guess. Oh, did Lawrence of Arabia theme play as you walked around? No, it's just fuck me, it's hot. Fuck me, it's hot. Fuck me, it's hot. God, my feet are baking. Yeah, I got shoes on and stuff like that. I'm walking up this goddamn thing, and it's like you're just pounding away at this goddamn hill. And you're kind of going. I mean, I was young and a lot more fit then. And you turn back and you look at your car, where you come from, and it's just this. It's like that in the distance. It's like, holy shit, wow. I've been very fortunate in my life. having been to a load of places, being in Cyprus as a kid, being in Hong Kong as a kid, visiting places like Dubai, going around all these kind of very fascinating places, Brunei, seeing the Sultan of Brunei's mosque, which is a very, very lavish affair, to say the least. Kind of like the golden minarets and stuff like that. It's like, wow. Yeah, I know that feeling, John. Probably going to get a bit more of that in a bit here as well. So, having seen a bit of the world, not nearly as much as I probably should have, but more than most. It's enriched my life no end. So I always consider myself incredibly lucky to have done that. Yeah. I've been playing a lot of changing the subject somewhat. Guessing you're a military brat? Yes. OnlyFans. Oh Jesus! No, to be paying me to put my clothes back on. Yeah, I mean, I got a bit of a kind of couple of things that are sort of New Year's resolutions, I guess, as we're sort of running up to that. Like I said earlier, I've just decided that kind of like I ain't supporting the Hollywood stuff any more than I have to. There'll be the occasional bit, but I ain't going to the cinema, generally speaking. I ain't forcing myself to sit through a lot of the stuff that they kind of dole out. And the thing is, there are so many good movies still out there that I haven't seen, so I haven't really missed any of it over the last couple of years. I haven't once gone, oh my god, I missed the cinema. Oh my god, why can't I watch the latest blockbuster? Or the latest tentpole? I just don't struggle with that anymore. There's so many good films that I can sit back and see, and it's easier than ever, generally speaking, to do that. If I just want to test out a film, I can get it on digital, and then if I really like it, I'll get the physical copy of it at some point. I can do that for less than the price of mostly it's like HBO Max and that kind of stuff. And this goddamn subscription thing is like absolutely ghettoizing everybody into kind of like the little camps, which I think is just astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing to see that kind of happening. So if I want to watch a film that happens to fall under the Disney camp, I've got to go Disney Plus, and then I want to watch this other film from another studio, I've got to go to their Plus. And this other film over here is in another Plus. It's all plussed. And you can't just go, generally speaking, and go, yeah, I just want to see that one. No, you got to have the season ticket, And then you'll only get to see the first 50 minutes, and then you have to have the Super Plus. You're looking forward to seeing the Batman. I suspect it'll probably be quite an interesting one, that one. As these things go. But, yeah. Next to a movie I no longer need to see. It's such a shame to be in that situation. I think the cinema experience will. It should continue in some respect, but I think it's the multiplex. It's this industrialization of the experience, which is really kind of ruining things. How many times do you hear people going, I wanted to watch this movie, and it's just people talking or playing on their phones and kind of like being disruptive, and there's no ushers in the place to quieten people down. That's the movie experience these days. It's not a communal thing. It's just this sort of mob thing. And I just don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy that anymore. I think one of the reasons why I've got through this whole period with my sanity intact is because I tend to be quite a solitary person. I'm very happy with my own company, as long as I've got movies, something like that. As long as I've got the internet, I've got that. And this is one of the more social things that I tend to indulge in. Is doing this kind of thing, being around a whole bunch of lovely, like-minded people. We have discussions about stuff without. Although, yes, I'm kind of monologuing it somewhat, but it was very difficult on YouTube to do a kind of like everybody can kind of chip in kind of thing, which is why I put the chat, kind of down the side here, because I want you guys to be part of this. Sometimes backfires with the sex bots kind of kicking in with their dodgy websites and that sort of shit. But for the most part, it's like the idea of going to the cinema just, even before all of this, was just becoming a less and less attractive kind of thing. And you couple it with just the scummy way that a lot of the studios and these corporate hacks to think of film and how they deal with film and all that kind of stuff is just pretty awful. It's awful, and I don't want to support it any more than I have to. You look at DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff like that. Right, you get good quality stuff on there from smaller distributors. Be it the Arrows of the world or Shameless or all those kind of things, and they put real love and effort into the presentation. They don't always get it right, but for the most part they do a pretty goddamn good job. They make it interesting. There's a reason why I've got like 3 or 4 versions of Dawn of the Dead, like 4 versions of Eraserhead. It's because they make them really good. They make it worthwhile going out and buying those things again and again. Then you look at like the Warner Brothers DVDs or Paramount DVDs, and any given of the major MGM. They're fucking appalling quality DVDs and Blu-rays. Just absolute wank for the most part, unless it's one of the big tent poles, in which case they'll throw a few really cheesy making of kind of featurettes on there. So it's like, oh, really? Hello, Richard. Happy New Year, mate. Nearly. We're about half hour off, aren't we? I've been to the cinema and watching Battlefield Earth. And I've said, oh, that was a vanity project that did not work out. People watch it kind of because it's kind of funny for the wrong reasons, but it's funny. Personally, I found it tiresome. 2 girls, one punched another to the floor. She was pregnant. I said it was worse than I expected. Oh, Jesus. Have you seen a film called Don't Look Up? I don't know. It's familiar, but no. I did watch a film yesterday called Forget Everything and Run. It's on Amazon. I just kind of took a chance on it. Kind of enjoyed it. It's a sort of zombie film, but there's not much of that. It's done in that whole sort of it's a background threat kind of thing, and it's mostly about the interactions between these two groups of people. Okay, it's worth a watch. It's on Prime, like I say. Apart from Dune, what's your worst cinema experience? I Rise of Skywalker just because the film was awful. I have sat through some diabolical shit in cinemas. And there's probably only about 2 or 3 films that nearly made me walk out, and Rise of Skywalker was probably the worst. I think Dune was the most disappointing. I sort of braced myself for Rise of Skywalker. So I went in kind of hoping for the best but expecting the worst. I'll try and remember that one, Richard. Thank you for that. And but just to be clear, everyone. So Richard says Dune. I'm assuming that he means the David Lynch film, which I saw on it was like the super big format with 72mm or whatever print, and it was advertised as being this like kind of like amazing thing, and I was like kind of, oh, cool. Me and John sat there watching it, talking. Title Dune comes up, and it's cropped, and obviously so. And it's like, oh my god, that's awful. So I don't know what the fuck was going on with that, but we basically got a sub DVD version, sub quality DVD version. It was awful. Film nearly made me walk out. Valhalla Rising, Pray for Death. You know what? I can't remember which the other films were that nearly made me walk out. There's a bunch of them. I can't remember. I think, what was it? Oh, Jesus, not Party X, or it was like this kind of found footage one about these kids who have a party at their place, and the neighbourhood gets pretty much destroyed. And it was just fucking moronic. I kind of sat there, just went, I hate everyone in this film, and I hope that the destruction is visited upon their skulls. It just oh, I mean, one thing I hate with any movie is when it condescends to you. And I think that was one of those movies that sort of goes, oh yeah, but you know, there's consequences. Project X, that's the one. I mean, just the title alone, kind of, considering it's like, yeah, these guys kind of pull a stupid move and throw a party that gets out of control. Why call this thing Project X? It sounds like, you know, they're experimenting on aliens at Roswell or something when you call it that. Yeah, but no, it's just some dumbasses throwing the party. And it sort of presents them as being kind of like these you know, legends and that kind of stuff. It's like, no, they were horrible, selfish, narcissistic little shits. God, man, I mean, but like I said, I think Rise of Skywalker is probably one of the worst ones I've kind of, because apart from anything else, you know, you sort of go, you go through the previous two. You go, you know, as standalone films, all right. As sequels to each other, not so much, for obvious reasons. But then you get to the third one, you go, right, okay, well, at least it needs to try to make some kind of resolution. And it just, it literally exposed everything that's wrong with Hollywood. Just because all I'm doing is sat there going, this is the result of how many billions of dollars, and it's devolved into 3 movies of going, my toys are more important than yours. And J.J. Abrams is just kind of going through the motions of trying to kind of course correct, if we use the right the politically correct words. Personally, I prefer thinking of him trying to wrest the toys back under his control. I thought it was unforgivable. And the worst thing is, I just walked out of there. I mean, I was pissed off with just how bad it was. I mean, it is literally one of the worst made films for the kind of budget that it's on. If it was on a quarter of the budget, I would say they spent too much on it. It's just an absolute mess. The editing, the writing, characterization went straight out the fucking window with the second one, probably. But just, what a mess. Have you seen The Exorcism of Emily Rose? I think I did, and I didn't like it. There seem to be about 1 million of those films. But to find the worst movie ever, I suggest a melancholic feeling while the singing of angels try to make you feel better. If you do anything here, okay. Oh, but it means that you felt something. No, the anger at a film for being so bad. It's not the film moving me. It's the film irritating me. That's it. I mean, being angry at a film, you can justify something like I'll go back to Salo as an example. That's a film that really kind of makes people very, very angry, and that's kind of the point. Rise of Skywalker was supposed to be there to make you chunk as much shit down your mouth, kind of like popcorn. Throw that popcorn down your throat, and ignore the world for, what was it, 2.5 hours? That fucking film seemed to go on forever. So, making me angry at the film itself and the filmmakers is not a film moving me. It's not the kind of feeling that it should be inducing. I wouldn't have said. I know you know that, Kerry, but oh, Richard says, I thought The Last Jedi was worse. The Last Jedi has a massive amount of faults as a sequel. As a film in its own right, if you imagine it just as a standalone film, like it, not like it, whatever, it's a movie. And that's the thing, it's a film. Rise of Skywalker was not a film. It was just a collection of images. It was such a fucking mess. It's like anti-cinema. I actually genuinely mean that. It's like anti-cinema. It's not a well-made film. Although it's flashy, things about it look good. But the story's a mess, the characterization's a mess, the pacing's a mess, the plot is just all over the place. It's just what I go about a third into the movie, and I'd had enough. I'd had enough. But that's how I see Hollywood these days. You didn't like it because of how it destroyed Luke, and I fully understand that. I didn't recognise that the first time I watched it. I kind of hoped that what they would have done was explain why the character was like that. You can take that character, you can take any character, and you can shift their position of characteristics like kind of their outlook on life and hope and all that kind of stuff, and you can completely turn that on its head. But you should always justify it. You should always kind of like demonstrate why it is that character has got to that place, and they didn't do that. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Buggers. So, I mean, consequently, I've not even looked at kind of what films are going to be coming out. Matrix, the new Matrix, not interested. Spider-Man, not interested. Most of the Marvel stuff, not interested. I could potentially be interested in the new Doctor Strange film. Or will I feel the same when it comes about? I don't know. I'll probably wait till it's cheap on DVD or watch it on somebody else's. If I like it, I'll get it. But it's going to be a lot harder to persuade me to watch the vast majority of what's going to be coming out. And the thing is, it's sort of extended to my games playing as well. Because the games companies are now being, I say now being, they have been for a long time, are being extraordinary, to say the least. When it comes to this kind of like thing, talking about physical media and stuff earlier, I have, a modest but decent collection of old games. I have all the PS1 and PS2 GTAs on physical media. The ones beyond that, really kind of like, you're pushing the boundaries of being able to say you've got a physical media copy of it now. But so I've got Grand Theft Auto, Grand Grand Theft Auto London, Grand Theft Auto 2. I've got GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas. Got the Liberty City stories and the Vice City stories on PS1 and PS2. Right. So GTA sort of come along and go. Not GTA, Rockstar come along and go. Yeah, we're going to remaster those. Yeah, we'll remaster them. That'd be cool. So they hand it off to some mobile phone fucking developer. Go, yeah, remaster these for PC and stuff. And they kick out some broken ass shit. They call it the definitive edition and then go, yeah, you can't get the old versions now because we pulled them from all the stores. And that's what I'm saying. They could do that with digital. I've got the games. I was going through them earlier. So, this is my Grand Theft Auto collection. Not including... There is some stuff on PS3. I've got the Liberty City stories or whatever it is. So, no, I've got Grand Theft Auto 2 there. GTA London. There was supposed to be a second one of those, but I think it only ever came out on PC. The original Grand Theft Auto. Not the most well dated games, has to be said. But yeah. Liberty City stories, Vice City stories, San Andreas, Vice City, and Grand Theft Auto 3 in a very sun-bleached cover. Now, Rockstar don't want you to have those. They just don't. And you see, kind of like, if they could kind of make it so you couldn't get hold of those, they absolutely would. And I believe it was EA started at one point doing this thing where they would put registration codes into the packages. So when you sold it on, the next person who got a hacked down version. Otherwise, they had to spend a fiver and send them like $5, £5, whatever, in order to unlock certain parts of the content of the game. But now they've got the digital platforms. They're like kind of, they're really pushing it luck. It's just absolute bullshit. The GTA remasters are very special. Yeah, I've got the originals. Fuck the remasters. Why would I want them? Why would I want them? I've got PS3, PS2 and an Xbox. Sat right over there. As long as I can keep them running, I can be playing those games on there. No bother. But the thing is, the PS3 that I've got will play PS1 and PS2 games as well. The only reason it can do that is because it's like the first gen. So it was like the first release. Subsequent kind of versions of the console, they got rid of that ability to play old games for no other reason than they want to kind of upscale you or get you to have to buy it off of the store. So Sony's a piece of shit as well. Star Wars Holiday Special is officially canon. Yes, it's for those. I imagine many of you have seen it, but the Star Wars Holiday Special is remarkable. It's like first 20 minutes. It was like a. It's just Wookiees. No subtitles, not a goddamn thing. Wookiees and weird gymnastics. People go, oh yeah, but George Lucas didn't have anything to do with it. He denies having anything to do with it, but the people who made it says he was signing off on everything. It's George Lucas. It's George Lucas, kind of like a lot of his ideas were in there. He might not have been kind of on set sort of directing them, but You know that's what he was asking for. Good lord. Don't get me wrong, I love the Resident Evil 2 remake. It was pretty good, but I still prefer the original. But I mean, either way, I mean the Resident Evil games have mostly down to the controls have kind of dated. Resident Evil, the kind of current ones that they've done they're fine. I think I'm just a bit beyond that kind of gameplay now. Not in terms of superiority, just I think I've kind of had enough of going. Right, I've got to decide what thing I'm going to carry. Just give me a big infinite pocket, so I'll be happier. I know it's not the point of the game, but still playing your original Mega Drive. Oh, excellent! I'm thinking of getting at some point this year a Master System and a Mega Drive. Very heavily considering that, but I would need some sort of system to be able to kind of plumb into a computer monitor, which is doable. It just takes some converters. Bring it out on Blu-ray and show it to the people who made The Last Jedi. Shit. Yeah, that's the funny thing. It's more Star Wars than the Rise of Skywalker. Got a Star Wars holiday special somewhere, never made it through. It's very difficult. Watching it, I mean, the Riff Tracks edition of it is very funny. But trying to sit down and watch it cold as it's a real fucking arse marathon. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's boring as fuck. Like I say, first 20 minutes. And the famous part of it is that the grandfather in it, there's a scene where he watches porn. It's Wookiee porn. People went, no, you're reading into it, until the people who wrote it kind of went, yeah, pretty much he's watching Wookiee porn. Fucking amazing. Oh, Jesus. Well, yeah, John. Okay, I don't want to be kind of downbeat about it, but expect more of the same. Hopefully things will kind of like pick up. To be honest, 2020 was really rough. 2021 has been kind of a bit back and forth, but generally better. I think this coming year, hopefully, will be somewhat better. Could be worse. Could be droid porn. It's just 10 minutes of someone going with like a USB, kind of sticking it in a hole and taking it out, sticking it in a hole, taking it out. Oh, it's so USB-C. If you have a Mega Drive, then you can play Master System games. Not sure that's the case, is it? Really? I don't remember my Mega Drive being able to play Master System games. I would like the two anyway, because actually I kind of like the very specific styling of the Master System. Dear, oh dear. I'm going to take the dog out to desensitise him to fireworks. Poor little bugger. We never see Lumpy the Wookiee in sequels. Give thanks to Small Mercies. Oh dear. Even Mark Hamill's gone, yeah, I'd just shove it on the next edition of Star Wars that you send out. I think the worst thing is, with the whole thing, and this is George Lucas's fault in no uncertain terms. I think if they were to give a decent remastered remastered to the point of kind of being acceptable on the kind of technology we watch on these days, cleaned up version of the original trilogy would go a long way to repairing the damage that's been done. That would be huge, but George Lucas doesn't want it because it's not his vision. What a shame. What a shame. Because it just go, right, okay, here's my version, here's the original version. Much like the versions that they sort of did with, because I've got them up here. So, with these versions, it's got the theatrical cut, the original theatrical cut version, right, and the remastered versions. Now, the versions that they put on here were kind of shit out of like kind of like the art of somebody who just couldn't be bothered. It's a laserdisc resolution version, so it's a teeny tiny little box in a big screen. So if this obviously is like, you know, the screen, right? Yeah. So the version on there is like kind of like, I'll try to do this straight. There we go. So you got massive borders around all sides because it's not been upscaled. And that's the version he kind of went, well, I've been moaning about it for so long. Have this, peasants. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm glad I've got the original versions, but yeah, it's not the most attractive version. So I'm not opposed to it being kind of like, you know, digitally cleaned up and upscaled, and even, you know, kind of like the adjustments that they made, like with the snowspeeder scene, kind of just cleaning those up so the mattes work better and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You have the silver edition of the original trilogy. Don't care what Lucas has done with them since. Yeah. I used to have that, but even that's like a heavily kind of fucked around with version, because unless you've got, I think even on the VHS version, even on the original VHS version, there were several changes, because George Lucas, as soon as he made the movie, he was going around and kind of fucking around with things. But yeah. If you take dogs near noises as pups and they regularly grow up, they'll not bother as adults. Really? Okay, that's interesting. Not anamorphic then, no, because it really isn't. It really isn't. Thanks, George. And what does he do when you complain? He goes into his excuses bag. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. When I talk about George Lucas, I also recognise the fact that that he has made a huge amount of contributions to the way films are made and all that kind of stuff. You know, the technology that goes into them and that kind of thing. One of the things in the discussion that really does annoy me is it's kind of on the side that would, in most ways, be kind of in alignment with myself in terms of how bad the new ones are. When they kind of like go, oh, you should bring George Lucas back here, and you kind of go, well, what about the prequels? And they go, oh yeah, well, we're not talking about the prequels at best. Or if they do, they go, well, they're great, I grew up with them. You say, yeah, there's your problem. There's your problem. That's like your first exposure to it. So, you know, and very little acknowledgement of the fact that he made a lot of the same mistakes. Just in different quantities and in different places. And there you go. Good night. Lucas refused to provide a negative for Preservation Society. I think the Library of Congress does have the original versions. I think they have the original kind of... I think they got hold of them somehow. So now they're in the Library of Congress. I think that's the case. He did not want to give them that, though. He wanted to give them the updated versions. And I think he just wasn't interested after that. Kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Even the Day the Clown Cried has got its version in... was given an original copy. And Jerry Lewis gave him a copy before he died. Which I don't think is that far off before you can actually watch it. Picture that day. Oh dear. Oh, a few seconds off yet, Kerry. You're jumping the gun. No, I mean, like I say, there's a lot of things I can respect George Lucas for, but when it comes to preserving films, that's not one of them. He's not interested in it. When Steven Spielberg made the same mistake with E.T., he apologised and wheeled it back. There you go. Happy New Year, folks. I sing Old Lang Syne, but I don't know the words. Never bothered to learn the words. So it's either New Year's or the local airport's being attacked. It's one of the two. I think everybody's pleased to see the back of 2021. But there you go. Clock striking 12 here. Is it really? Okay. Fair enough. Excuse me, I've got to go outside in my Grandpa Horton once and shout at the fireworks. Oh dear. Hang on. Skull vodka, skull vodka. Oh yeah. I have drunk a shocking amount of this over Christmas. So I'd head over something else. Oh. Happy New Year. That goes over there. And of course I'm drinking it out of a skull. Cheers. It's good vodka. 2022 won't be too clever. We'll hit 300,000. Oh, thanks, Rob. I'll get my survival rations in. I think I've got plenty of toilet paper. It should be alright for toilet paper. Oh dear. Take the camera out. It's not long enough lead. Oh, Boris and his jokers here. Yeah, unfortunately. But you never know, it might be his last year of rule. Actually, I wouldn't be bloody surprised about that, considering all the shit that's been going on with him recently. Prince Andrew may get shipped off to America to face trial. Can you imagine? It has not all been bad news. Ghislaine Maxwell got voted. I say voted. Judged guilty. She got voted guilty. Everybody kind of stepped on her. Oh dear, oh dear. It's all fun and japes, isn't it? But still, we have the Ramblaholics. And it's been a lovely stream so far. I'm actually shocked how fast this is gone, considering I've still got my voice going, just about. But this is the longest, and the longest I've talked solidly for at least a month and a half. Don't know what it's like for you, but it sounds like the look of just shut up in Glasgow. Yes. Somebody closer has started firing those damn things off, so yeah, you'll undoubtedly hear it in the background because it is actually quite a good mic. Sorry, that probably sounds awful when I do that. So, yeah, Prince Andrew facing justice, which it's going to be interesting to see how she handles that, though. I know the coppers basically kind of close rank around and it says, yeah, we're not following up on any of that. MI5 and number 10 staff are the only people who could leak the Downing Street video and CCTV. Yes, you're quite right. Somebody was fucking about. Sorry, busy sending messages to friends and family. Yeah, it's but hopefully in about a month's time I'm gonna be able to pop up and see my brother and the rest of the family. Hopefully when work sort of calms down a bit and I ain't being expected to kind of like plough through shitloads of training, which is just gonna, yeah, not much fun. Probably been watching Lampy Man New Year for over 10 years. It just says something about my life, doesn't it, really? That I've done 10 New Years consecutive, I think. Excuse me. Thank you, Richard. Crazy to think I've been doing it for this long, though, isn't it? So, 2009 started. It's now 2022. Literally just cracked 15,000 subs. I'm well behind the scope when it comes to like successful YouTubers, but that's all right. I do what I do, and people can join if they want. If they don't want to, that's one thing. Despite YouTube doing what they do and making it very difficult, or a lot more difficult for people to kind of find this stuff, it's been a hell of a ride, to say the least. National security has sworn to defend a nation. That includes booting out a fool PM and his lackeys. They've got democratic processes that they have to follow as well. You only recently discovered you, Glenn, but thank you very much. I hope this year that, you know, I can build up the momentum with doing what I do. I might need to think of some new formats to kind of make things a little bit less onerous when it comes to putting, you know, content together. Because doing the stuff that I do, it takes time, it takes a lot of energy, and this past couple of years has been one of those things where both of those things have been somewhat lacking. And the last thing I want to do is go down that line of just kind of shitting stuff out. And that's a funny thing, actually, because I've got a LinkedIn, right? And a job came up, film and entertainments writer. Like, oh, okay. Had a look at that. It's like Screen Rant. You go 5 to 10 articles per week, but you can work in as much or as little as you like. It's like 5 to 10 articles a week, and it's not like you're going to be able to live on that. Let's be honest, and they're probably going to be paying very little for that kind of thing. But you just know they're going to have an editorial style that is just completely at odds with any kind of integrity when it comes to writing about films and stuff. And it's one of the things I've always kind of promised myself is I won't go down that line of being hacky about what I do, regardless of whether people kind of appreciate my approach, and you guys seem to appreciate what I do. I've never gone down that line of going, well, this stuff is popular, and therefore I'll go down that line. I do it with this kind of style. The closest I ever came to do that was when I did slightly more kind of comedic reviews as a sideline, just to try some stuff out. And I immediately, it's like 2 or 3 into it, I just kind of went, it's not me. It's not me. Oh dear. Got to learn a lot of stuff from Rampy in my journey, collecting and appreciating 72 Nasty. Oh, that's really cool. The video Nasty's review. How do you kind of follow? I mean, the nice thing about it was it was the Nasty's review was both a blessing and a curse in some respects, because 72 titles, great, okay. It's easier to start with because you sort of go, right, I've got a list and I'm going to work my way through these things. Come hell or high water, I will come through these things. And the good side is that it kind of forces you to watch certain films. I probably would not have got to see a film like The Tragedy of Me Blacksmith if I hadn't been working on the Section 3 list, as a for instance. I probably wouldn't have watched, almost definitely wouldn't have watched The Witch Who Came from the Sea if I hadn't been doing the Video Nasties list. And that's the good end of it. The bad end of it is you sort of go, I really want to write about that film over there, but it's not on the list because you're busy working on that very narrow sort of thing. And there was a few films I kind of wish I'd never bothered with. That's not actually true. I mean, even a bad film generally has something in terms of an enjoyment factor, or at least a satisfaction. Yeah, I've seen it now, so. Drop Dead Dearest. Oh no, that wasn't Drop Dead Dearest that had the Mastermind theme. That was I want to say Deranged, but it's not. It's crap. It's gone out of my head. Drop Dead Dearest was the re-release version of I Miss Your Hugs and Kisses, which I believe is getting just gotten a release in America, or is getting re-released in America. Demented. I know the one you mean, Grob. I want to say Demented, but that's the Section 3 title, isn't it? God damn it. Delirium. Thank you, Kieran. And it was something similar. It's just like, oh my God. I have not thought about that film in a very long time. That was a hard one to get hold of. I think that's one Simon got for me. He got me about like half a dozen of the really difficult ones to get hold of. I think it was I Miss You Hugs and Kisses, Delirium, and a few of the others. I think Mountain of the Cannibal God, because that was hard to get hold of at the time, and a few others. He did me a real solid. So I'm always in debt to Simon on that one. He very, very often seems to spend time beating himself up about various things, but he's always struck me as a very decent fella. Keeps going, oh, no, I'm not worth any. Yeah, you are, mate. You seriously are. And I've had a few lovely people help out along the way. I think, certainly when I'd bought kind of copies of Murder Set Pieces to do the In Extremis on. Both of them ended up being the cut versions, and then Juliet, who's kind of watches my stuff and is friends on Facebook, says, I've got the uncut version, I don't want it, you have it. She sent time and effort to send it to me, which is very sweet. I had Scream for Justice sent to me on VHS from Australia. That was a difficult one to get hold of. The worst was Boogeyman 2, yes. Now I've got like 3 different versions of it. The best version I got is, I've shown this one before, but it's I had to send off to America to get hold of the X-Rental version. This film is the definition of a joke that went too far. It's way too drawn out. Uli Lamel clearly despises Hollywood, and that's his revenge on Hollywood. It's arguable about how good a revenge it was, but when it comes down to it, the idea was interesting. Return of the Boogeyman got on VHS and found a German DVD. I've got the British version of Boogeyman 2 as well, and I've got a DVD which is like the Redux version, which is just not worth a damn. Don't know if you still have Delirium VHS. Had a copy somewhere. It's a slightly cut version, as far as I know, as the British version. The version I've seen is not the full uncut version. And I think it's the pitchfork death, which is the major cut in the film. It's a weird little film. It doesn't quite work, but yeah, just full of these sort of secretive kind of Illuminati type militia people. It's weird. How many subsequent films are there to the Boogeyman? I've got Revenge on DVD. That's no, Boogeyman 2 is basically, it's called Boogeyman 2 in Britain. It's either Britain or America. It's called Revenge of the Boogeyman over here, I think. Let me just grab the VHS. There you are. Right. So it's Revenge of the Boogeyman on UK and Boogeyman 2 in America. Have you seen early film Strangers in Paradise? No, I haven't. Hello, John. And a Happy New Year to you and Nastia. Been resting since skipping the 72 titles. Have a few Section 3, but not buying at the moment. Yeah, Section 3 is it's a significant tougher one in some respects to get all the stuff for, because some of the stuff is just really fucking obscure. There's a few of them that I got hold of that are easy to get hold of now. Same with the video nasties, really. A bunch of them that are very difficult to get hold of back then that are easy to get hold of now. One of the hardest ones still to get hold of, unless they've just re-released it, would be I Miss You, Hugs and Kisses, which is just a very, very strange film. It feels like a made-for-TV thing that just went too far. Oh dear. Sure that I'm sure that original Boogeyman 2 cut will get. I think it had one at some point. I seem to remember somebody kind of saying that it was available on DVD somewhere. Yeah, Pitchfork death in Boogeyman 2 and in what's the name of the film where the woman's dream conjure up a monster? Oh, think. Our hardest one to get is Enter the Devil. I've got that on bootleg, and I believe this does have a Blu-ray now, or at least they're about to release one. That one. That's a bootleg version of it. Shockingly good film. Really is. It's incredibly low budget. The acting is actually way better than it has any entitlement to be. There's a lot about this film that you sort of look at, you go, that's kind of what Manos was aiming at. They kind of got it right in this, for the most part. It makes spectacular use of the kind of location that they're in. It's based on like local folklore, urban legend type stuff, which is actually based in some kind of reality. The Slayer, that's the one. See, I remember the Slayer from the actual time, seeing that thing kind of knocking around. And then like the subsequent kind of VidCo releases and stuff like that. Try getting hold of Wrong Way. That's one of the hardest ones to get hold of. You can find kind of bootleg copies of it, or generally speaking, it's one of those films that you kind of like Google it, and the only place you'll find it is on hardcore porn sites. I think that's where I ended up having to get it. It's like kind of scrub my fucking hard drive out after. Get these fucking viruses off my hard drive. So it's not terrible. It's just a very slow and kind of deliberate sort of film, I think. I think it's not an awful film. It's just a bit kind of wonky, apart from anything else. Box of the Band bought from CEX got me started. Got both of those up there, mostly for the documentaries, because I forget which version it is. Which one is it? So the best one, really, is the second one, because it's got tenebrae, contamination. You know, you can sort of go hit or miss, whatever. A lot of people like it. I quite enjoy it, but it's not a great film. Don't Go Near the Park, which is just bizarre, really. But The Witch Who Came from the Sea is particularly good. The Evil Speak version on this was not bad for the time, but it's definitely one of the better of the two, because the other one had I Spit on Your Grave, which is the British cut. And the British cut is extraordinary, to say the least, in how badly they cut it. I honestly, I actually did I was working at one point on a comparative kind of cut between the original version, the actual version, and the version that was done for the British audience, because it's edited in such a way that like during one of the, I think it's the first attack scene where they drag her out and they throw her on the ground, and it literally keeps cutting back to this 4 or 5 second kind of segment, and it's the same bit, and it just kind of cut paste, and they remove a lot of the close-ups of her face and all that kind of stuff, and it's really fucked up how badly they treated it. But it's got that Zombie Flesh Eaters, which is one of the early kind of like versions of it. I don't think it's the full uncut version. Driller Killer, yeah, uncut and all that kind of stuff. You've got the Evil Dead on there, which is not a bad version, I want to say. Last House on the Left, Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. Obviously, it's British versions of both of those, and at the time they weren't the best versions. So most of these, actually, I think even the Evil Dead was not the full uncut version on this. So that was not such a good one, but the second one was good because it had some of the better films apart from anything else on there. Particularly The Witch Who Came from the Sea, which was unavailable in any other form at the time. Now in 2022, when I was a kid, I thought they'd be flying. Well, they're working on that, aren't they? I'm sure Elon Musk will get a self-driving flying car at some point. Then deny everything when it starts falling through people's roofs. Recently upgraded Island of Death to Blu-ray. Yes, I got the Blu-ray of Island of Death up there somewhere. My struggles with the director aside, I still quite enjoy the film. Good night, Minty. Glenn, when I had the Box of the Band 1, I changed the discs for I Spit, Last House and Nightmares. For the US ones, Evil Dead and Zombie Flesh Eaters were uncut. Yeah, okay. Zombie Flesh Eaters, I'm pretty sure wasn't uncut, but I don't know. You might be right. It's been a long time since I watched that version, because I actually have some really nice versions of them up there. The boxes also have the documentaries. Yes, that is true, and that is one of the reasons why I ended up getting the Box of the Band 1 as well, because it was worth it for that. I did have a bootleg copy of them on my computer, but then I kind of went, it'd be nice to have the original. Probably won't be watching wrong way anytime. Don't like the idea of constantly doing virus checks. Actually, I would like to see a definitive version of that film, regardless of how kind of good or bad it looks and that kind of stuff. Because the version I've got is choppy as fuck, and I'd be interested to see if that's actually how the film is. Yeah, he's a bit of a dick, is the director of Island of Death. There you go. What you gonna do? Anyway, I think we should probably call it an evening there, folks. People are starting to peel off because, you know, it's, to be fair, it's nearly 12:30. It's 12:30 pumpkin. So, and I can't believe how fast this has actually flown by. I know I started an hour later and that kind of stuff, but probably just as well, because I will lose my voice in about the next 20 minutes. That may be a good thing, depending on your opinion. But I do have some recording to do tomorrow. I used box of the band. That's what, £6 a tenner. Oh yeah. It's worth having in your collection. It's worth having in your collection. But I shall say a good night to you folks. You have a happy new year. Hopefully the hangovers, if any of you are likely to have one in the morning, may evaporate quickly and all that kind of stuff. But it's wrong. Sorry, I keep saying I'm going to finish. It's wrong way a good measure of what happened in cinema when the cert system lapsed in the US. I'm not quite sure where you're coming from there, but I mean it's porn. It's kind of porn. That's it. I think it probably had some hardcore in it at some point, but there you go. What, you're going to watch the original Crimes of the Future? Enjoy, if that's the word you can actually apply to that. Going to say good night. Take care. May you all have the best of opportunities and chances and luck over 2022. I hope it brings a bit more joy than the last couple of years. Not sure when the next stream will be. Probably a couple of weeks' time, and I will see you then. And in the meantime, I will try to pull my thumb out my butt and actually get that goddamn review done. So take care, folks, and don't forget, watch The Ninth Configuration if you got the chance before you watch the review. I think it's a film that certainly deserves a cold viewing. And the point of that thing is less a review than it is a critique. So take care, folks. Good night, and enjoy the rest of your beer.